I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest is here. I know you know her very well. She is the host of Bad Faith podcast, and she is Bernie Sanders' former press secretary. Let's go ahead and bring her in. Welcome to Briahna Joy Gray. Welcome, Bri.
Thanks, Sabby. It's always such a pleasure to be with you here.
So great to have you on. We have so much to discuss post-election.
Yeah, I mean, I frankly have taken a sort of a break from it myself on my own podcast, but I certainly have thoughts and feelings. So this is a good opportunity for me to say some stuff I've been sitting on for the last week or so.
So the first thing I'm curious about, you're in DC, and every time I go to DC, I have to remind myself, this really is like the White House bubble. And I mean, it's different. I mean, like Massachusetts is blue, but going to DC is a different experience because the White House is there. I mean, Congress is there, and people are just very much like, one of the things I've noticed, like even talking about an idea of like a third party or not supporting one of these two parties is just looked at very, very oddly. So I'm curious, this particular election, I made a prediction on this show that Donald Trump was going to receive 312 electoral votes and that he was going to win every swing state. And I did that based just off of the data at that time. And many people told me I was crazy. There's no way that was going to happen. But that did actually happen. And a number of people were very shocked when Kamala Harris lost. So I think the question I have for you, living in DC, what was the mood like post-election after Kamala lost?
I got to say, I really felt like business as usual. So obviously, it's a very subjective experience. You know, I don't go into an office every day or anything like that. So my, adventures out into the world are relatively limited. But I was comparing the experience to after Trump won the first time when I was living in New York. I remember waking up that day and getting on the subway and going to work, and it was deathly silent. There was like a pall across the entire city. And this time around, even though you're completely right that so many people were surprised by the election result, so many people seem to be still in denial. as to the reasons why certainly Kamala won and lost and the extent to which that she lost, it didn't really feel at all exceptional. And frankly, I've overheard more than one conversation between people in, I mean, it's hard to characterize a space as progressive or not progressive, but young people in social environments that if I were in, say, New York, I would presume were Democrats, kind of speaking openly and casually about voting for Trump. I was in a bar at a birthday party a week or so ago, and I heard two guys saying, "Yeah, well, I'm not MAGA or anything, but I voted for Trump." And the other one goes, "Yeah, me too." And they were kind of like, "Yeah." And so like it doesn't. I think that in some ways we're just in a very different paradigm. Trump has been president before. And I think a lot of people just simply didn't buy into the idea that something genuinely anomalous or fascistic was going to happen if he were reelected. And certainly in a city like this, where there are a lot of people from various political persuasions, in part because there are Republicans who work here for a living, it just didn't seem that remarkable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was curious about this because one of the things they continue to bring up, corporate media, also The View has been talking about this a lot, is that they said that people didn't vote for Kamala Harris because of misogyny and because of racism. I believe, there's some of that, but I don't believe that's not what I heard from most people. I heard the economy was a big one with younger voters. Gaza was an issue. And I want to show you something. This is really interesting. When I compared her to Biden and Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris received 85% of the Black vote, and Hillary Clinton received 89% of the Black vote. Joe Biden received 87% of the Black vote. So Kamala Harris lost the Black vote. And I haven't heard anyone on corporate media really dive into that. There's a lot of people pointing fingers at white women. So I want to show everyone what the exit polls show about white women. And it says here that she received 45% of the vote from white women. Hillary Clinton received 43% from white women. So Kamala actually got more support from white women than Hillary Clinton did. When I look at Joe Biden, similar, where Joe Biden received 44% of the vote from white women. So even though a lot of people are saying, well, white women didn't come out for Kamala Harris, apparently they did for her more so than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. The big one to me is how Kamala Harris lost the youth vote. And I heard a number of people on corporate media say going into this election that Gaza wasn't really going to make a difference in this election. And apparently it did, because there were a number of younger people that didn't show up to support Kamala because of the Gaza issue, not just Muslim voters. And I want to get your perspective about that.
I think that's spot on. I mean, I do think, as you know and have spoken about, that the expectation that abortion was going to be a real driving issue because of what we saw from midterms performance fell flat. I think that what we need to realize, perhaps one takeaway from this, is that people voting on a single issue is very different than how they feel about a candidate who's representing a whole cluster of issues. And we saw a number of progressive agenda items do very well on election day. But Kamala Harris, as you well know, insisted on defining herself as completely lockstep in tandem with Biden's approach on Gaza. In the first 3 weeks to a month of her campaign, during which she did absolutely no media interviews, she and her team made one thing clear, which is that she would not support an arms embargo. She's part of an administration that has been sort of proudly criticizing campus protesters, defending universities and defending cops rather, and siding with university administrators who have implemented draconian policies on campus. A gun was discharged on Columbia's campus as they were trying to jackboot kids out of protesting an ongoing genocide. And I think, in my personal experience, even people who are, say, liberal Zionists are at a point where they're very uncomfortable with the Biden-Harris administration's position on this issue. And so it's completely unsurprising to me that the youth would be most affected by this. And not to mention, it's not just their votes, it's the fact that they're often the driving force for door knocking, volunteer efforts, social media sharing, word of mouth. That entire infrastructure is going to be hurt by apathy coming from the youth. And to your earlier point about the Black vote and the Latino vote as well, it's hard to be it's hard to be a Bernie bro right now. I'm revisiting a lot of the things that we said back then, right? I remember trying to shop an article in 2020 about how well Bernie was performing with Latino voters and how that was going to be really key to the future of this party if people really gave a fig. And nobody was interested. This was after he won Nevada with 70% of the Latino vote. And I think on some level, the Kamala campaign, the Democrats understood that there was some wobbliness with the Black vote, which is why they trotted Barack Obama out to tell everybody to pull their pants up and stop being a misogynist, right? But there were real policy issues underlying people's discontent. You mentioned Gaza, obviously, but Joe Biden is someone who came in saying that he was going to give 44 million Americans some form of student debt cancellation. That fundamentally didn't happen. And you see talking heads kind of crowing online about, like, why aren't the kids grateful that somebody somewhere got scraps? Well, there's a pretty big deal, a big difference rather, between the crumbs that were given, and imagine the impact of 44 million Americans being directly touched by that program, not to mention the many millions of others who are in their families, who help pay for their loans, who are in relationships with people with loans, who are negatively impacted in terms of going to buy a house or supporting their children or doing other kinds of things. That would have been a huge boon. Not only did Joe Biden not land that policy, and I would argue and have argued in the past that he designed the policy in a way that made it vulnerable to failure, potentially purposefully. He chose to, a year before an election, end the Trump era student debt moratorium, which was a huge economic benefit to so many student debtors in the United States of America. So for the last year, to the extent that people had felt some relief in the COVID era, for the last year, people have been experiencing not just housing, rising housing costs and higher grocery costs, all of which contributed to their feelings of precarity, but hundreds and thousands of dollars of increased costs in student loans directly as a result of Joe Biden's choices. Not, I'm blocked by the Supreme Court, but in that case, directly as a result of Joe Biden's choices. So no, I'm not surprised that we didn't see high youth turnout. This was in some ways, very predictable.
It's always interesting, too, because you mentioned Bernie Sanders, and that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Bernie Sanders was able to energize a broad coalition. A lot of people point out the younger voters, but I remember going to Bernie rallies in 2020, and I met all different types of people. Yeah. Independents. There were some conservatives that were at Bernie's rallies too. That was interesting. But all different types of people, different ages, etc. I feel like Bernie Sanders created the blueprint of how to really create a massive political movement across the country, and getting people of different political ideologies and the working class base together. Kamala Harris decided not to use a blueprint that was created that just showed you how to get the people to come out and support. And I want to ask you, why do you think that is? Because one of the biggest things that I heard from people is that Kamala Harris isn't talking about the economy. She has no working class agenda for the people. She talked about the housing, $25,000 down payment, which actually turned out to be a tax credit. And that was all confusing to people, all these different tax credits. And it's just like, even when it came to a minimum wage, Jordan Sheridan was on the show recently, and he said he saw billboards in Pennsylvania that said Kamala Harris supports increasing the minimum wage. And he was like, yeah, but to what? You know, she wasn't running on a working class agenda. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the consultants that were a part of her campaign, or do you think that that was just solely her decision?
I think it's totally a donor class issue. I mean, you might have seen this report about a specific ad that frankly tested through the roof, apparently, that never aired anywhere because the donor class was concerned about her representing herself as someone who was going to do things like bring down the cost of living. When you raise $1.5 billion and lose $1.5 billion in 100 days, you really have to ask the question who that money is coming from. And Kamala Harris had more billionaire donors than Donald Trump, more than obviously anybody in this electoral context. And I think it really showed with what the emphasis was in her campaign. I mean, I think your point about the minimum wage and Jordan Sheridan's point about the minimum wage in Pennsylvania is a really good one. I was really shocked to discover, I apologize for my own naivete, but my sort of expectation is that in bluer states, people aren't subject to the federal minimum wage. Pennsylvania is a state where they're still working with a federal minimum wage. This is something that I would expect a candidate who is deeply invested in winning that state, a state that has over 50,000 minimum wage voters, would focus on. And instead, you get very clear campaign messaging. We saw it in debates and interviews, et cetera, that she is very much against a fracking ban, despite the fact that there's only about 17,000 fracking jobs in the state. And most Pennsylvanians are very wary, frankly, when you poll them about fracking because of the health implications of the same. So why on earth would someone choose to talk about fracking instead of talking about a minimum wage hike? Why would someone talk about having the most lethal military in the world instead of talking about what polls demonstrate are the public's concerns, which is getting into more forever wars, money being spent endlessly in Ukraine for a war that's only getting increasingly entangled and which can't be won in a traditional sense against a nuclear power when Americans at home are suffering so mightily. And now after the election, we're seeing all of these liberals who frankly manufactured consent for this exact outcome, slowly acknowledging what the left has said for a very long time. But it's paltry comfort, frankly, because I'm not very comforted in one that they're actually going to take this lesson into the next season. And the reason is because there are these structural reasons, to your point, Sabby, with the donor class, the consulting class, that are driving the messaging in the first place. When I saw that thing about the ad that they chose not to air, that says we invested resources into something, poll tested something, and know it works. They knew it worked, and they chose not to use it anyway. And that is, I think, a very dangerous political place for us to be in.
I agree. It's interesting. James Carville, who was actually very critical of Bernie Sanders when he was running for president and was critical of the progressive left and has continued to be, is now saying something different. I want to show you this clip here of James Carville on MSNBC News, something he said recently about Bernie Sanders.
I think Senator Sanders has some of a point here. And that is, there were things we could have run on harder that have effect. The minimum wage. It passes everywhere by 70%. I mean, I know that President Biden was for it and Harris was for it, but we need to put it front and center. What about taxing the incomes over $400,000 and taking that money and put it in a first-time home buyer's mortgage relief fund? I mean, there were things that Senator Sanders would favor that we could have put more front and center. Now, there are a lot of things that are just popular that Democrats are for, and they're popular with every kind of Democrat in the country. They also happen to be popular with independents and even some Republicans. And we should run on a popular thing. A popular thing was not continuing the Biden administration. That was clearly not what people wanted. I think he's a great guy, but people didn't want more of that, and that's what we gave him.
So my question is, Bree, you have explained this a number of times, not just during Bernie's campaign, but post Bernie, post Biden, 2020. And there are a number of times people, especially on Twitter is bad for this. A number of times people on Twitter would try to shout you down and say, no, that would never win. That would never work. Why James Carville, of all people, who continue to say the Democratic Party cannot go too far left. They have to be in the center or further towards the right. And he applauded Kamala Harris's campaign. Now, all of these people are coming forward and saying, yeah, she should have did this, but they didn't say it at that time. Why do you think James Carville is saying this now?
I don't know. I think they might be a little spooked. Genuinely. I think that some of them are genuinely spooked. That being said, it is not uncommon for people to say the right thing at a time when they're out of power and they can't do anything about it. There's safety in having Republican leadership. You'll hear a lot of the progressives start to talk about Medicare for all again, because the failure of the party to act on it will no longer be an indictment of Joe Biden and the party they're supposed to back, and it will just be a generalized indictment of Republicans in power. That being said, there does seem to be some kind of shift happening. And I've been reflecting on this a lot because you got to understand that for me, I'm having an incredible sense of deja vu. I mean, when I started writing and left the law, it was because I was really taking on the pernicious way that identity politics were being used as a weapon against the left. Like literally I think my second or third piece I ever wrote for Current Affairs magazine, I just retweeted it because Nathan Robinson raised it again, was addressing this like inescapable belief that was so widely held at the time that the future of the Democratic Party ran through courting voters on the basis of their identity preferences, which were largely about representation and not actually about what policies various racial or gender identity groups actually cared about, and triangulating away from class issues. And if you said the words economic anxiety, if you said class, you were accused of not caring about race, and even more than that, being an active racist. These things were pitted against each other as mutually exclusive. The idea that a Black person might have economic concerns, the idea that poverty, economic disenfranchisement is such a core part of the consequences of racism. Black people aren't just like sitting around mad with our feelings hurt because somebody said, I don't like Black people, but we're being denied housing and employment and all of these things with economic consequences. If you tried to make those kinds of arguments, we were shouted down aggressively for years following Donald Trump's victory in 2016. And the reason was because there were these consultants in the Democratic Party who were very specifically pushing this narrative. And you can understand why it was very attractive to the donor class. If you expect that Black people are simply going to want you to say support affirmative action, or, you know, kind of vaguely say inclusivity and representation are good, without actually supporting any underlying policies that disproportionately affect Black people, like free public education or Medicare for all or raising the minimum wage, then you don't have to change anything to the economic status quo that benefits them so richly. And it does feel like maybe after 8 years of hand-wringing about some of these policies, that this particular loss, because of the difficult to ignore shift that's happening among all of these demographic groups, that they've at least finally realized that demographics aren't destiny, and that particular strategy is not going to work. Now, do I believe that they're all going to start having a full-throated Bernie Sanders-esque message? No, especially because as much as Kamala lost and ran a horrible campaign, I don't think she lost by enough to completely cause that class of people to lose faith. I also think there's a very strong argument that they would frankly rather lose than have a genuine populist like Bernie Sanders anywhere near the White House. You see Chuck Schumer and Minka and Joe fraternizing with Donald Trump and saying they're going to build bridges now because this is a big club and you're not in it. But it is interesting to me that someone like James Carville, who just loathed Bernie Sanders and was so hateful. I was trying to pull up some of the quotes from how he talked about Bernie back in 2020. For him to even give a little bit of credit here, I don't know. I'm interested to see how long this sticks. I'm not overly optimistic, but I do suspect that there's going to be another triangulation. Again, not to full-blown like Bernie democratic socialism, but a triangulation that accommodates the fact that simply saying we're going to put, Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill isn't enough to drive Black votes.
That's right. And another thing, too, Bernie Sanders, after Kamala's loss, came forward, and he got a lot of heat for this, but he came forward and he said that it was a disastrous campaign. And I was just like, yeah, why didn't you say that during that time? I'm just like, Bernie, come on. I think a lot of us knew that. And I remember he was on Meet the Press and he was asked, like, do you think Kamala Harris is progressive? And Bernie Sanders said, well, yes, I think she is. She doesn't agree with everything I do, but I think she is progressive. And now after the campaign, he's saying it's a disastrous campaign. He's also saying this. He's back out there telling people on MSNBC about the billionaire class. I want you to hear this part.
What we have got to deal with is the reality that we cannot allow this type of billionaire money to determine who the next president of the United States is. And the word has got to go out. Citizens United has got to go, in my view, public funding of elections.
So what do you think is happening with Bernie Sanders? Because you worked with him, and obviously I know all of us in 2020 that were part of that Bernie movement. I mean, there's no way anyone could have told me that Bernie Sanders couldn't have won. There's no way. He was able to get thousands of people at a rally with no celebrities, by the way. Bernie didn't have to have a celebrity at every rally to get that turnout. That's how you know the support was genuine and was real. But what do you think is going through his head right now? The fact that that's the first time I heard him come out during the Biden-Harris administration and say some of the things that he's saying, that it was a disastrous campaign. And He's being very vocal now. And he said he disagrees with Nancy Pelosi and he disagrees with, all these other people that are saying that Kamala ran a great campaign. What do you think is happening with him?
Look, I think everyone's trying to save face. Nancy Pelosi, who, argued people down over if they wanted there to be an open primary, is now saying, oh, well, there should have maybe been an open primary and maybe that would have, that I still think Kamala Harris would have won, but that might have set her up for more success. And I think Bernie Sanders, this is a kind of version of him saving face as well. I think these sentiments are sincerely held, but I think that you're going to find yourself in a credibility crisis if you are willing to censor those opinions in advance of a party that, again, was taking more billionaire donations than the Republican alternative, and choosing to endorse Joe Biden so early, before a time at which there could have been a real left primary challenge, especially with the encouragement and support of someone like Bernie Sanders. I think it is, frankly, too little too late. And a sort of kind of a brand rehabilitation. I guess it's better that he's saying this than saying nothing at all. But I would really love an interviewer, and this is unlikely to happen because he's not sitting for interviews with leftists, but I would really love an interviewer to have an opportunity to ask him, well, why didn't you say this when it mattered? Did you try to pressure the Kamala Harris campaign on the source of their donations? Why weren't you talking during what should have been a Democratic primary about the New York Times map that had to be revised because it was showing the donor, the amount of donations to each of the 2020 candidates all across the country, and there were so many Bernie donations that you couldn't even see the regional spread of the other candidates. So they had to make a version without Bernie's donors in it whatsoever. And he out fundraised everybody else in that race. Why weren't you making the case for why a candidate like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris should and could have been financially independent at a time when it mattered? And if they would refuse to do so, which of course they would refuse to do so, why weren't you throwing your weight and your voice behind a potential candidate who was willing to be financially independent? God forbid a non-Democratic Party candidate who, of course, by the nature of their ideological commitments, like the Green Party or the PSL, were financially independent. So I don't know. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine as to the timing of this, but I will voice some disappointment as to the timing of this.
Right. And another thing I want to bring up too, in reference to the media, because I know you mentioned he's not going on to left independent media. Why do you think that is? During Bernie's campaign, and I'll be honest, the only reason why I knew as much as I did about Bernie's campaign is because of left independent media, because they were telling me the truth about what Bernie Sanders wanted, not corporate media. Corporate media was saying he's going to take your health care away. It was really ridiculous. But that's how I knew about members of the squad that were running for that time. It was left independent media. And as we saw, it just seems like after 2020, Bernie Sanders just completely has written off left independent media. And so many members of the squad, until more recently, Jamal Bowman was on Breakthrough News with Ronnie Akalik. And during that interview, Jamal Bowman admitted he doesn't think that the Democratic Party can be reformed. I'm like, why weren't they appearing on left independent media while they were in office? Why did Bernie Sanders kind of break away from left independent media, do you think?
I think because he doesn't want these kinds of hard questions. I mean, nobody wants to be challenged on their own ideals. It's one thing to go on, Fox or sit down with someone who you don't agree with and make your case to them. It's another to have to talk with someone you ostensibly do agree with and defend the ways in which you've arguably betrayed your own values and ideological commitments. And most people just honestly don't want to put themselves in that position. I wish they would, though. And I saw the Bowman interview, and I'm glad that it happened. I wish. Look, I understand people's vulnerability. Obviously, he was very politically vulnerable because he was ousted. But I do wish that people appreciated the benefits that can also come from getting the trust of an audience and a community that are, in fact, voters and door knockers, and an online community that, frankly, really buoyed and enabled candidacies like AOC's to thrive in the first place. Bernie is beloved in part because he has this long history of understanding the value of independent media. He had his own little fireside chat style show back in the day. It was a priority for him on the campaign, for the campaign to have its own podcast, which I obviously ran. That being said, he came on it twice in the year and a half or whatever of the campaign season. He only was willing to come on his own podcast twice. A podcast you have, of course, a complete editorial control over. And so I don't know. I have trouble squaring his historical value for independent media with his own preference these days to basically just go on with Dana Bash or whomever on MSNBC or CNN. And he's not someone who is bad at addressing substantive criticism, who is amazing in debate context, who, again, does go on Fox News and do these town halls frequently. So I think it really does come down to, like, sometimes you just don't have a defense for certain kinds of positions. You've decided you're going to play the inside game. You've decided there's more you can do working within the Democratic Party than without. And so therefore you're taking positions and doing things that are frustrating to your audience, to the base. That being said, even if I disagree with his choice to play the inside game, I think he should still make the argument as to why he thinks it's beneficial, even after what was done to him in 2016, even after what was done to him in 2020, even after what's been done to Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush and Nina Turner and so many others, even after the failures that we're seeing from the Democratic Party right now, even as we're seeing the rightward shift of the Democratic Party, both prior to the election and continuing after.
What do you say to people that say that that type of candidate cannot win? And I never believed that. I always thought that Bernie could have beaten Donald Trump because he was winning among independent voters, which that is very crucial. He won Nevada. He won New Hampshire. Everything changed when it got to South Carolina. And all it took was for an endorsement from Jim Clyburn. It says, we're going to go out there and support Joe Biden. And Joe Biden won South Carolina. People just forgot that Bernie came in second place. And it was like, after that, everybody just was like, let's just move towards Joe Biden. It was really weird to me how that one statement from Jim Clyburn just really changed the race altogether. But I ultimately believe that a Bernie style candidate can win because they are running on a populist message, because they are running on issues that benefit the working class. And I think and Donald Trump is a weird figure, but people still put Donald Trump in that populist lane as well. They see him as someone who's an outsider, even though he's a billionaire. I keep telling people this, but they see him as someone who's an outsider, and they're like, he's different and he's running more on a populist message. And remember, he ran on draining the swamp and that whole deal. Why do you think people still say that? It's more so it's liberals that continue to say that that type of candidate cannot win.
Yeah, I just had a debate with Michael Eric Dyson on my podcast where we went through a number of these sort of, I think it's fair to describe them as liberal sort of, I don't want to say talking points because that sounds a little demeaning, but touchstones that they come back to in a way that sometimes starts to feel to me like they're trying to assuage their own feelings of cognitive dissonance. Like we're seeing all the evidence in the world that Bernie would have won in the wake of the Kamala Harris failure. And to live your life without feeling guilt on basically guaranteeing not one but two Trump terms because of your unwillingness to listen to the left, you have to kind of ignore the truth between what some of the things the left is saying, and that includes. Oh, sorry, I'm realizing that my light's not plugged in, and that's why it keeps going off. That includes pretending like, well, it wouldn't have mattered if we elected Bernie anyway because he would have lost. Throughout 2016, Bernie polled about 10 points up on a matchup with Trump. He was clearly in both races more electable than the chosen Democratic candidate. But again, I really don't want us to like historically whitewash how much of an impact identity politics and weaponizing the idea of anti-Black racism and specifically against Bernie was used to manufacture consent for white liberals to diminish his campaign and for the Democratic Party to actively thwart his campaign. So I think you're right to say that it felt weird how outsized Jim Clyburn's impact was. But the South Carolina win was accompanied by with like, I don't want to make up a number, but my recollection is like $70 million of earned media. So it wasn't just Bernie lost his state. So what? He had just won 2, arguably 3 states before. It was the narrative was he cannot win because he cannot win Black voters. You would think that there were more Black voters than Latino voters. There aren't. We haven't been the biggest minority in America in a while. That's just a value neutral statement. You would think that South Carolina, a red state, was electorally material. Based on the coverage, the news coverage that came around that performance. So it wasn't just you lost a state, it was that you lost Black people, generally speaking, but Democrats can't win without Black people. And frankly, you're a racist. That was the subtext. And that's what was really damaging. It created a permission structure for white people to say, great, I didn't want to vote for him anyway, and certainly no, I'm not going to. Elizabeth Warren, I would also argue, is part of that permission structure where people who said, well, I'm a lefty, I'm well-meaning, I'm a lefty, I just don't like Bernie Sanders. Oh, I can say, I really am still left because I like this Elizabeth Warren woman. And we know at the end of the day, the role that she played in staying in through Super Tuesday with an anonymous donation, a donation that didn't have to be disclosed until after the fact, that ended up being from like a solitary billionaire California donor that kept her through the race and enabled her to shiv Bernie one more time. This is, of course, after she accused him of not believing that a woman could be president. So yeah, I want us to be really conscious of the fact that it wasn't just Clyburn, it wasn't just South Carolina. It was all that was supposed to mean about who Bernie was as a person, as a moral entity, and as an electable entity. And his value with independence didn't matter. And it doesn't matter. I remember Soledad O'Brien, after he won Nevada with 70% of the Latino vote, tweeted out, okay, whatever. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Whatever, we'll see what happens when a diverse state votes. Diversity means Black. And this is from a Latino woman, ostensibly. You know what I mean? So the erasure was really crazy. So yeah, I do have a little bit of schadenfreude about Democrats now wetting their pampers because they're realizing, well, I guess the Latino vote matters, and the Latino vote isn't necessarily going to behave the way that Black voters have historically. And guess what? Black voters aren't necessarily going to behave in the way that Black voters have historically. And maybe you need to actually offer people something. Maybe Latinos liked Bernie Sanders because they're the most underinsured ethnic group in this country. Maybe Kamala Harris should have considered having a healthcare policy for someone under the age of 65.
Yeah, incredibly true. I think a big part of it too is like one of the things I did wish, and this is why I disagree when Joy Reid says that Kamala ran a flawless campaign. I don't believe there's a such thing as a flawless campaign. I think there's always room for improvement. But one of the things I look back on and I always said, I wish Bernie would have had like a reparations plan. I know Nina Turner had talked to him about that at some point, because I really do feel like that would have set him totally apart from Joe Biden, who Crime Bill Joe, that was the weird thing to me. And I'm like, people, you're telling me, because South Carolina has the oldest electorate, so they leave that part out and they just tell you Black people didn't want to vote for Bernie. But you're telling me you want to vote for Crime Bill Joe, but you're not willing to vote for the candidate who marched with Dr. King. It didn't make any sense to me. And I wondered, and I thought about that. And I was like, if Bernie had a reparations plan, that would have really set him apart from Joe Biden. What do you think about that?
I think Bernie should have had a reparations plan because I believe in reparations. And I said as much internally during the campaign. I also think that there's a way that he could have transformed the conversation around reparations away from this idea that it's like contemporary white people paying their hard-won dollars to contemporary Black people, and talk about it in the same restorative justice sort of tort law framework that so many other people who've received reparations have gotten. So, there was Bernie caught flag, I think rightly so, for voting to support reparations for Jewish Americans that I think, if I recall correctly, the money came from one of the European train companies that transported European Jews to concentration camps and death camps. That makes all the sense in the world, right? The companies that were literally directly responsible for and profiting from a genocide should be held accountable. And there are innumerable contemporary banking organizations and other kinds of corporations that could be the direct targets for funding a reparations fund, for instance. And that is very much on brand for Bernie. I pitched something like that. It didn't go anywhere, but I agree that there should be he should support reparations. That being said, honestly, I don't think it would have mattered, because the attacks on Bernie about reparations weren't about reparations. The other candidates said they cared about reparations to the extent that they wanted to hurt Bernie and make him look bad for Black people. And the second Bernie was a non-entity, have you heard any of these folks even mention reparations again in their lives? Maybe with the exception of Marianne Williamson, to her credit. None of these other candidates ever brought up the topic again. And we're seeing this very interesting fallout for Kamala Harris now, where a lot of the sort of like questionnaires that were circulated around the very crowded field in 2020 were designed, I think, quite obviously to try to trip up Bernie Sanders by getting increasingly novel cultural issues, trying to get him on the record in a way that would make him look less progressive than someone like Kamala Harris or someone like Elizabeth Warren. And Kamala Harris got, obviously people probably know about this, caught up with the survey answer about whether or not trans inmates should be able to get gender affirming medical care. Now, whatever you feel about that underlying issue, it is kind of sweet irony, frankly, from my perspective, that someone like Kamala Harris would find themselves dinged by answering affirmatively to that sort of a question when she doesn't care about it to begin with. And you heard it in some of her answers. She doesn't care. None of them care. They don't care about reparations. They don't care about trans people. They don't care about anything. But they did care in a primary context about somehow looking more to the left on Bernie. You can't look more to the left on Bernie on economic issues because they're corporatists. So what did they do? They tried to find the most kind of, I don't want to say French, but novel or relatively vanguard cultural issues that they could find to nail him on. And now look, right? So it doesn't, I don't think that, like, I was actually debating this with somebody recently who was talking about the Green Party gaffe on the Breakfast Club, where there was some confusion about the number of congressional members, right? And he was saying, well, the left has to have their ducks in a row. You can't make those kind of mistakes. And I agree. Like, you're going to be held to harsher standards, and you got to be better than the average Democrat. That being said, no matter how perfect you are, they're going to come after you over some nonsense. So to me, this is illustrative of the value of independent media, of not relying on the mainstream to deliver your message and to convince people to support you. Donald Trump has gotten, the worst press of anybody that you can imagine. But because there are all these other figures with huge reaches who give him very positive press in the independent sphere, it doesn't really matter what MSNBC says about him. And frankly, even when some folks on Fox were kind of ready for him to go or weren't accepting him back in 2015, 2016, or were excited about Marco Rubio this last time around, or whomever else was throwing their hat in the ring, RFK Jr., whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So yes, on principle, I think Bernie should support reparations. No, I don't think it would have made a difference in 2020.
That's interesting. And that brings me to third parties and Jill Stein. The Bernie platform is at the Green Party, for those who are not aware, and then some, because they have even more. Jill Stein was talking about Cancer Alley. She had a Black agenda. Like, it goes a little bit further than Bernie's platform. Yet a number of us who did not want to support Kamala Harris or Donald Trump and did support Jill Stein, we were smeared as being right-wing or secret right-wing people. I can't make this up. Secret like right-wingers or something like that. It was really weird when some of those same people supported that same type of platform when Bernie was running on those issues. And now it was like all of a sudden billionaire money doesn't matter. Medicare for all doesn't matter. Just vote for the Democrat because you don't want to get Donald Trump. I thought that
didn't matter.
Gaza doesn't matter. Like, and that was another thing. And I thought Jill Stein had a great platform. She went on to win the Muslim vote nationally. And I don't know if everyone's aware of that. But CARE, they did an exit poll and they were surveying throughout the election. She was in the lead. She stayed in the lead with the Muslim vote, and then she won the Muslim vote nationally. So I used to argue with people. I used to say that, I think Kamala is the spoiler Because how is it that Jill Stein and Donald Trump receive more of the Muslim vote than you? And you're supposed to be the Democrat. You're supposed to be the one that's supposed to be better on the Gaza issue. It did not make any sense. But what do you say to those who say we still need to try in the Democratic Party and are opposed to working outside of the two-party system, opposed to third parties because they'll say we don't have ranked choice voting nationally, et cetera? Like, I always keep telling people you have to build a third party. I wish Jill Stein would have done better than she did. But my viewers, they were the ones that reminded me that Jill Stein actually had a town hall on CNN in 2016. And she, they didn't give her one this time. I think that can make all of the difference. But I have to say that I was incredibly disappointed with people who were very vocal about what was happening to the Palestinian people. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, forget about those Palestinians, just get on board and support Kamala Harris, even after she said she would not agree to an arms embargo. So what do you think about, those that say we should not try a third party movement and that we need to work with the system that we have?
I find it deeply frustrating. Look, I personally don't believe you should vote for Democrats. That being said, I can appreciate an argument from someone who says there are real life social safety net policies that are going to come under the chopping block if Donald Trump is going to be president. And these are already precarious people, and we need to protect our Social Security benefits and our, kind of legal aid funding and those kinds of things. Like, I understand that argument. I have, friends that do direct services work, and I don't think that is a naive or empty argument. I think it is a short-term argument, though, that is going to ensure long-term hurt and suffering. That being said, to those people, I would say if you were living in a deep red and a deep blue state, you should still, your vote is immaterial to the outcome of this election. You should be voting green. Even if you think you can work within the Democratic Party and you want Democrats to win, if you believe, if your values are actually deeply held, you should be fighting tooth and nail to help the Green Party in whatever way you can. And that is by helping them get to 5% of the vote and get the federal funding and ballot access that they desperately need. You should also be, to your point, Sabby, fighting for ranked choice voting. There was a ranked choice voting initiative here in Washington, D.C., for instance. You should be door knocking and volunteering and doing all you can for the Green Party. There's no excuse. But if you're someone who kind of does this thing where like, well, the Green Party isn't strong enough and can't win, and therefore I'm going to vote for a Democratic Party, I'm sorry, that's cope. That's just a way to assuage your guilt over having completely inconsistent principles. I frankly don't want to hear your opinions on a genocide when you voted for it. I don't want to hear it. I will be honest about that. I'm not interested. And I had to unfollow and mute some people that I really like on these here internets because like I didn't want to find myself in some argument that I didn't really want to be in. Because I find it to be, frankly, a kind of a contemptible position to take. And now these people are back after they've cast their Kamala votes talking about how terrible everything is. But I'm like, you were in New York voting for Kamala for free. And I think I tweeted this out, like if everybody voted like Muslims, if every ethnic group voted like Muslims, we could live in the country that we deserve, that working people deserve. And it is you, it's a collective action problem, and it is your fault. You should feel guilty because Muslims did it. Because they put their money where their mouth is. They didn't just like feel bad for Gaza. They understood the moral implications of voting for the administration that is literally perpetrating a genocide, the worst human rights crisis that we've seen in our lifetimes. So do you just like care and want to put a Palestine flag in your bio? Or is this something that you really feel like is genuinely an existential crisis for millions of people and the entire world? Because what imperialism is being exported, is being perpetrated in Palestine right now is going to continue to be exported around the world. And we're seeing it in cop cities, and we're seeing the implications for our own community as Black people here in the United States of America. And it never stops.
That's right. And this is a good point, but here by Meredith, Stein lost votes to Trump. People angry about Gaza voted directly for Trump. not third party, to make sure Harris lost. I did hear that from Abandon Harris, that a couple of days before, people had decided they wanted to make sure that Kamala Harris lost, and they decided to vote for Donald Trump to punish her for the genocide support. Lots of Arab Americans in Detroit did that. I did hear that from them. And that's another thing too, where it's just that when I see now, Mehdi Hasan was on MSNBC as a guest, and he said, it's just sad, people in Dearborn thought that Trump was going to be better on this issue. I'm like, that's not what I heard. I didn't hear that they thought he was going to be better at all. They just really wanted to make sure that
it's so patronizing and sometimes racist, frankly, for people to be framing it as a naivete when they're the ones that are deeply naive about the political implications of their vote and how to actually use political leverage. It's deeply insulting.
Yeah, 100%. And I ask people, when people say, well, then how do you move forward? One of the things I've been telling people, and you brought up ranked choice voting in DC, is about the ballot measures, whether you live in a BI state or not. All these states and districts, they do have some type of measure that is on the ballot. And I want to show people an example of a red state, which is Missouri. When people say that these policies are not popular, which is not the case. Missouri is a red state. And I want to show you guys a few things that passed. Right to abortion passed in Missouri. Right to abortion passed in Missouri, a red state. So it wasn't so much that people don't care about the abortion issue. I found that a number of people just felt like that decision should remain at the states. So they passed it in a red state. Another one that they passed here in Missouri, and this one is huge. It is the minimum wage. They just increased the minimum wage in Missouri again and earn paid sick time. That passed in Missouri, again, a red state. So when people tell me that these policies are not popular, I disagree, because I see progressive policies passing in red states. When we look at like how to move forward, I think it's really easy to focus on the national election because that's what receives the most news. It's just the reality. But when we talk about progressive policies, I do feel like sometimes there's not as much attention to these policies passing in the local level, like passing in DC or passing in the states. And why do you think that is?
Well, look, I think that you're right. That has historically been true. And this is not novel. I remember very vividly $50 minimum wage passing in Florida in 2020 with 60% of the vote, a state that obviously Donald Trump won overwhelmingly. And I remember like ripping my hair out trying to make the case that this is evidence that these are the kind of policies that could help Democrats win. That being said, I do see some people now, and again, this could be this kind of short-lived window of, oh gosh, I guess the left had a point that sometimes exists after a colossal loss. But I do see people sort of scrutinizing some of these progressive ballot measures as, and kind of making the argument that we in the Bernie camp have been saying or formerly in the Bernie camp have been saying for a very long time, which is that these policies are popular. But again, and I respect Michael Eric Dyson for coming on my show a great deal and having this out with me in like a 2-hour conversation. But you hear this pushback. There's like incredulity. People just don't believe that progressive policies are popular. They've never heard the stats about 88% of Democrats and 49% of Republicans supporting a policy like Medicare for all. They really bought into this sort of Afro-pessimist narrative, which, and I don't mean to be taking shots. I have so much respect for what Ta-Nehisi Coates has been saying recently about Gaza. But, I was, again, reflecting on all of the stuff I had been writing back in 2017. And, he was a big pusher of this idea that there's no point in trying to offer economic populism to working class and poor whites because they just are racist and they're going to reject any policy that is seen to be benefiting Black people as well. And that's being disproven all around the country, right? I think there's been this ironic sort of pigeonhole that Democrats have put themselves in where they say you have to talk about everything in racial terms or else you're a racist, like what they accuse of Bernie of, right? You have to be talking about racially specific policies in explicit racial terms or else you're a racist. But also, white people won't vote for a policy if they think it's going to benefit Black people. So you can't even push those policies at all. Okay, so what exactly do you expect us to do? Okay, my argument was, okay, I accept that it is, of course, the case that historically, policies that are perceived to be going to the quote undeserving poor are less well received. But that's an argument for universal policies that are going to everyone and cannot be stigmatized in those ways. And also an argument for maybe pitching the policies a little bit more universally and not turning every single statistic in a national audience. I mean, sure, you pitch to the audience you're in front of. If you're in a in front of a Black environment or a Latino environment or Asian environment, you can make it culturally specific, or women, or whatever it is, or North Carolinians, or whatever it is. But to frame everything the way that sometimes Democrats do, where it's like, we're going to cancel student debt because Black people disproportionately benefit from student debt cancellation. I mean, I love that stat. I love to hear it, and it's true. And I think it should be directed toward Black audiences. But if you believe that that is going to make people against student debt cancellation, well, hell's bells. Then pitch it differently. Say 44 billion Americans are going to benefit from this. Say the fastest growing percentage of people who are going to who are having that are experiencing student debt withdrawals are seniors who are having their Social Security checks garnished for student debt payments. Have a more inclusive framing that resists that kind of stigma. But you can't have it both ways.
I want to pivot a little bit to Rising. This is really interesting. I noticed that you are doing radars again. And I don't know if everyone has seen this, but one of the things that I really did enjoy about Rising was the radar segment, whether it was you or Kim that were doing those. I love the radars. And I saw a post from you on Twitter where you said that you were bringing those back. So I want to hear from you a little bit about that as well. I know you've talked about, what happened at Rising, so I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again. I know you've talked about that enough. You're probably done with that conversation, but I do want to hear about the new radar format that you've started.
Yeah, so I started a Substack kind of a little impulsively. I've been wanting to do it for a while. I've been squatting on the space for a while, but I've been hearing from a lot of folks that say they just really miss the radars. And, the way I was using radars, especially toward the end when there was so much pushback against me doing Israel stories, covering Gaza, was to try to, synthesize a lot of news stories into a relatively short time period so that we didn't have to devote other blocks to them, or so that I could get them on the record because they wouldn't devote other blocks to them. And given that the format of Bad Faith is 2 long form episodes a week, there's a lot of news that I don't get to touch. And so I've been missing radars. The audience has been missing radars. So I've started doing them over at Substack. All of them that I've done so far are free. I wanted to work out some of the kinks and figure out, graphics and things like that. But at some point, I'm going to, have some kind of funding model there, either put some of the radars behind a paywall or do maybe some kind of call-in type show over there. But for right now, you should go over there and check them out because it's been really nice to have an opportunity to do video essays, and it enables me to kind of get back to writing again, because it does feel like you're writing an article and then saying it into a teleprompter, which I gotta say is a lot more difficult with my setup here at home than it was with the studio with all of that support. But we're working our way through, and I appreciate everybody's patience as I work it through. And as I said, while I am working it through, it's completely free. So I encourage people to go over there and check them out. People have asked for me to put them on YouTube. I tried to put the last one on YouTube, but it had a John Oliver clip in it, and YouTube was not allowing it. So I do have to work some of that stuff out as well, but the most consistent place to go and find them is over on Substack.
Yeah, well, you are, I think everyone will agree with me on this. Rising is not the same without you on there. It really isn't. Someone sent me a clip recently and I was like, I can't. I was like, I don't know. I'm struggling here to get through this. I have not been back on Rising since you left. They have reached out. And I was just kind of like, oh no, I may not be able to speak freely.
Yeah, look, I appreciate it. Like, this is, I don't want, I always wanted you on, Sabby, because I really valued and the audience hearing your perspective. Like, the value of the show to me was always getting access to an ideological, diverse, and large audience that needs to hear reasonable, sensible, relatable left perspectives. And so, I leave it up, everyone can make their own decision. I selfishly relish rising, not performing as well. But that being said, like, I certainly would not begrudge anyone wanting to take the opportunity to make the left case on that platform as long as that platform persists. That's why I was there, despite my frustrations and concerns about the show. It's why I stayed after Katie Halper was fired. And, you know, the left has so few opportunities to go on any kind of corporate news that I don't know. I remain really torn about the value of at least exploiting the platform.
What advice would you give to, this is the final question for you, Bri, and I've asked a number of people this question. What advice would you give to someone who was interested in starting an independent media, whether it's writing or whether it's YouTube? And I someone asked me this question recently and I said, be patient. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably better at giving this sort of advice than I have, Sabby, because you've had such extraordinary success that, from my perspective, seems to come from being very informed, running a really good, tight stream that covers a very good range of stories, and parceling them out so that you get your kind of vegetables and then like your kind of funner, internecine drama or whatever at the end in a way that's very balanced and is like really entertaining. And also just having good politics and being such a consistent content creator. I see all of those things in you, and I think that those are all things that are necessary for success. When people ask me about my own trajectory, it's so weird. I mean, it's so anomalous. I was a lawyer who hated it. And, I started writing to draw attention to this little podcast my friend and I had started, but it's almost impossible to start getting any traction when you're you have no name or no celebrity or no anything. Like, why is someone going to start listening to your podcast? We would have like 70 Spotify listens, a day. But I got on Twitter and I was like very online and tweeting up a storm and bad about Bernie and all of that stuff in 2016, 2017 era. And that actually started to drive some listeners. I would engage with people who are now, like, I'm glad to call like my friends and colleagues, including Zed Jelani, who apparently listened to the podcast and was part of who like flagged me as a writer for Ryan Graham to hire me to The Intercept. So what advice can I give? I don't know. Post, tweet, create content, be consistent, try to find a niche that hasn't been filled. I think that part of why my writing started to take off was because this identity politics thing was a huge issue, and so many white writers, not at all their fault, were very easily dismissed when they tried to say some of the same things that I was saying. And the fact of me being a Black woman gave me more credibility and a lot of professional opportunities. I ultimately was hired to The Intercept, and after about 10 months was the Bernie campaign reached out to me. So it's not a typical path. And it's not necessarily what I would advise for kind of stability reasons. I mean, ultimately, I did go to law school and have a fallback. So I'm not trying to ask anybody to jump into the void. But I do think that people need independent media. I think there's an appetite for it. But it does take more work. I'm sure you can attest to this, Sabby. It takes more work than some people think it's going to take. And so be prepared for that, especially posting consistently and kind of being online and being up to date on what's going on is a kind of all-consuming thing.
Well said. Briahna Joy Gray, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Bye.
Take care.
All right, guys, that was Bri there. I hope you enjoyed that conversation, ladies and gentlemen. We have 4 more news stories that I do want to cover tonight. I think you're going to get some laughs. One of them you're not going to laugh about because it's serious, but the other ones you are going to laugh about. They're pretty hilarious, I think. If you haven't had a chance to do so, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you very much. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And I do want to make sure that I shout out patrons, and I want to go to that beautiful thumbnail that you guys like so much. I'm saying A now. I don't know what's going on. Is it a Canada thing? Let's go ahead and pull up the patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. Appreciate you, fam, so much. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. Don't forget about that, fam. And of course, there are Sabbies. I always say they're the meat of the sandwich. If you make this a sandwich, Jersey Mike's, what's up? And of course, there are also members. All of their names are featured here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I do want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Oh, I did that already. Sorry. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you. And I do want to go ahead and show that thumbnail so you can see other stories we're going to discuss tonight. I also have a bonus story, which came my way right before I started the stream. You're going to laugh at that one. We're going to have lots of laughs tonight. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're discussing, of course, Briahna Joy Gray was just here. Kudos to Bri. I know she's a very busy person. We're also going to discuss Morning Joe is bashed for meeting with Donald Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, yikes. Oh my God. Mika and Joe are not having a good week. We're going to get into all of that. You can tell by their facial expressions. We're also going to discuss, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, Marianne Williamson is now calling out the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris's campaign. Marianne has some things to say. She went on 2 different shows to say these things. We're also going to discuss Joe Biden has escalated the war with Ukraine. We're going to get into that. I'll tell you what happened today with that war and why you should all be very much concerned. And the bonus story, ladies and gentlemen, Roland Martin got paid by Kamala Harris. We're going to get into all of that, folks. I told you we got some things to discuss tonight. Yeah. And I think I told you to smash the like, right? Yeah, I told you to smash the like. So the theme for tonight's show on the chalkboard is Will Dems Learn? So we already discussed part of that with Briahna Joy Gray. We'll get into that with some of these other stories as well. But I do want to go ahead and start with some of the chats here. I know we got a lot of super chats, so let's go to some of those. Thank you, Trusting Success. Sabby, if it wasn't for Bri bringing you on the hill, I probably would never have found your channel. Both of you speak truth to power with no regrets. Oh, thank you. Shout out to Susie Stone. 2 of my faves, watching you first, then Jill on Katie Halper. We need progressive women more than ever. Keep up the great work. You all are keeping me informed, involved, and sane. Thank you, Susie Tone. Thank you, One Titans. Can you guys explain the 5% thing? I Google and YouTube it, but it doesn't come up. If the Green Party gets to 5%, they get federal funding. So it's huge, right? Because the Democratic Party gets that, the Republican Party gets that. So that's actually a big deal. Then they're really a force to be reckoned with the 2-party system. Thank you, John. Love your show. Would you ever consider having someone from Just Stop Oil on? They are a British resistance group whose co-founder is serving 5 years. Of course, I would. Email me. My email address is in the details tab of my videos. Thank you, Mad Matt. I hope you get happier. Briahna, you're my favorite political writer. Come back to writing. Thank you, Whitney. I remember stumbling upon BJG on Twitter before becoming familiar with her writing. Really grateful for her work and her courage. Thanks, Zeneb. The Dem Party will do anything to suppress a populist leftist, even propping up the GOP incumbents. Paula Jean Swearigan, Jessica Cisneros, Rick Trevino, Eva Putzova, on and on every time. Agreed. Thank you, Cool Blue. Conciliatory remarks about Bernie, but Dem Party insiders is an attempt to reach out to people who supported Sanders and to get them to vote blue. That's a good point. Thank you, Zeneb. Losing to Trump is a fundraising boom for the Dem Party. Dem consultants will be celebrating. I saw it in 2016. Everybody hearing this? Thank you, Nas. Connection is not great in this stream. Looks fine on my end. Let me fix. Yeah, it looks fine on my end. I think you need to adjust you have to go into YouTube and adjust in the settings and adjust the quality. Sometimes for people, it's that way. Okay. Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Hussein. I'm 28 and I hate how the world lacks empathy. I wish I can offer my own life for the kids in Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan, or even here in the US, to be honest. I know it's really sad, Hussein. Thank you, Stefan. Dyson was trash. Good work exposing hypocrisy. Yeah, guys, if you haven't seen that debate with Bree and Michael Eric Dyson, please go watch that. Shout out to Tabitha for becoming a Sabby member. What's up, Tabitha? Thank you, Eric. There are no fair elections in America, certainly when the questions of race and political power are evident. That is Lorenzo Comboa Ervin. Thank you so much. Thank you, Silvopina. You go, ladies. We'll have to catch you later, but want to express my gratitude and all that both you do. More Sabby and Bree podcasts, please. Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. Will the Dems be able to bring those Trump voters / defectors back into the fold? Will they even try? That's a good question. My guess is they probably will be too embarrassed to try. Thank you, Abdul. Any thoughts on Lindy Lee going Cat Williams, Shannon Sharp, like on the irresponsibilities of the DNC finances? I haven't seen that yet. I need to check that out and I'll get back to you. Thank you, DeAndre. Jill Stein and her VP were the only candidates who reached out to independent Black media for an interview to discuss Black folks' issues at the grassroots level. Yeah, you're right about that one. Thank you, ABC. Green Queens. Thank you, Lawn Guy. Briahna, will you interview anyone from the American Communist Party? I think they're trying to address the problem of what to do next. Probably best to ask her on probably Twitter. Probably best to ask her over there. Thank you, New York Varsity. Under the Fair Use Act, using the Oliver clip is not considered copyright infringement if you are using it to critique or parody. But like Eric said, tell that to YouTube. LOL, I know a guy. Yeah, tell that to YouTube. People get those strikes all the time. Thank you, Ultra AL. Hi, Queens. Love this collab. Keep up your good work. And thank you, Roger. She owes you 4 more appearances. Okay, thank you, Roger. Okay. Let's go to our first news story here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have not heard this news, you really need to buckle up for this one. So it was just a day or two ago that Joe Biden had announced that Ukraine has his permission to use long-range missiles. You can see that here in this article by the New York Times. Biden allows Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range U.S. missiles. Now, I want to tell you why this is very concerning. Number one, obviously, this is going to escalate the war, right? Which is what we do not want to happen. We want this war to end. We do not want an escalation. Number two, long-range missiles are very problematic, and I want to explain why. Number one, it is harder for you to hit the target, which means there's more likely to be more casualties using long-range missiles. This is a no-no. Vladimir Putin was very clear that if this did happen, he would consider this a war not only against Ukraine, but against the West as well, thus escalating us into World War III. Now, I find it interesting that all of this is starting to happen just as Biden is about to leave office. It's now November. He doesn't have that much time left as president of the United States. So it almost kind of seemed like to me that Biden is trying to escalate this war, because this is one war in particular where Donald Trump has been vocal about that he wants to make sure that this ends on day one. He's already reached out to Zelensky. We'll have to wait and see if that actually happens. But why would you try to escalate things on your way out? The threat of nuclear war has now never been more real. Zelensky spoke out about this. He's actually very happy that Joe Biden gave him permission to use long-range missiles in Russia. Listen to what he says here.
President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine says actions will speak louder than words.
Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions. But strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves. They certainly will.
So that you heard that there from Zelensky. He's saying that the missiles will speak for themselves. Never wanted to end this war. He wants to continue to escalate it. Like I said, it's obvious they cannot beat Russia. This is just causing more death. And for people who care about Ukrainians, a number of people who say, what about the Ukrainians? Ukrainians are continuing to die. The average age of soldiers that are being enlisted in the Ukrainian armies, they're like in their 40s. I think it's like 45, 46 years old. They're running out of men. And this has been happening for quite some time. Now, Scott Ritter, I want to remind you, warned everybody about this. He warned everybody about what would happen if this was not brought to an end, that Joe Biden would try to escalate this war. Again, they are answering to the military industrial complex. He is not answering to the needs of the people. The president of the United States does not care about those Ukrainian people. He doesn't care about the Russian people. He is working for the war machine. Scott Ritter was recently on George Galloway's show. Please check out Moats TV if you haven't. George Galloway runs a pretty based show over there. After this was announced from Joe Biden, and I want you to hear what Scott Ritter had to say about this.
Atlantic Ocean and not worry about the conflict spilling over, they are wrong. War will come to America. War will come in the form of Russian nuclear weapons, and American cities will be destroyed. So why did Biden do this at this time? There's only one reason. He was told by his intelligence officials that Russia is bluffing, that Russia will do nothing, that this is the time to escalate because Russia is banking on, Trump coming in and changing the calculus. And so Biden is seeking to firm up the algorithm of war, of confrontation, of escalation before Trump comes in. I believe that Biden is sadly mistaken.
Let me go back a little bit because I needed to start this at 58 seconds. Sorry about that, guys. Because you missed the first part. Here we go.
Point out the fact that if he doesn't know it, that's because his brain has ceased working, and that may be a possibility. But he knew on September 13th and 14th that when he last was confronted with this decision and opted not to give permission, what the consequences would be. Russia made it very clear that for the United States to give Ukraine permission to use American-provided long-range missiles to strike targets inside Russia, that is an act of war.
An act of war, meaning that we would too then be at war with Russia. This is very serious, you guys. And for the people who tell me that foreign policy is not important, I want to ask you this question. Do you have children? Are any of those children under the age of 18? But at some point they will be 18. What if they're 17? What if they're 16? Because you know what's about to happen, right? You know that Congress, I covered this a while back, that they're trying to pass legislation basically to reinstall the draft, to make it so that as soon as they turn 18, these kids are automatically registered for the draft. So even though you may say you don't care about foreign policy, if you have children, I think that you should care about foreign policy because it could be your kids that are sent overseas to fight these wars and to kill innocent people. The war machine must come to an end. It must go. And Scott Ritter, again, not perfect, but Scott Ritter has been warning people about this for years. He told you what would happen. He told you what would come. And Joe Biden just has to, on his way out, let's try to escalate things with Russia. And I would argue, considering that Joe Biden is experiencing cognitive decline, he should not be making foreign policy decisions right now. That should be taken away from him. This is a mess.
That America becomes an active participant to the conflict, and Russia will treat America in this way. Anatoly Antonov, the former Russian ambassador to the United States, drove this point home when he told former U.S. government officials who called him at the behest of the Biden administration that the consequences will not be limited to Europe. If the United States believes that it can hide behind the Atlantic Ocean and not worry about the conflict spilling over, they are wrong. War will come to America. War will come in the form of Russian nuclear weapons, and American cities will be destroyed. So why did Biden do this at this time? There's only one reason. He was told by his intelligence officials that Russia is bluffing, that Russia will do nothing, that this is the time to escalate because Russia is banking on, Trump coming in and changing the calculus. And so Biden is seeking to firm up the algorithm of war, of confrontation, of escalation before Trump comes in. I believe that Biden is sadly mistaken and that we will see a Russian reaction. And here's the irony of it all. The only hope the world has now is that Donald Trump sends a signal that he will not allow this escalation to stand, that when he becomes president, this all comes to an end, therefore giving Russia the chance to limit its response so that it could be peace. Otherwise, Russia will respond, and I believe that we are going to immediately find ourselves in a cycle of violence that could very well lead to nuclear war. This is what I was warning everybody about in the lead up to the election.
Yeah. He continued to try to tell people about this. I will give him that. Scott Ritter's been on the show a number of times. I will give him that. He has continued to try to warn people and to educate people. Well, and there's a reason for that, because this morning, as of today, Ukraine took that, go ahead from Joe Biden, and they did fire long range missiles into Russia. This is not a game. None of this other stuff matters. Meg the Stallion twerking does not matter. It doesn't matter how many celebrities Kamala can bring to a rally. None of that matters if we are at risk for a nuclear war. You can see it now. This was posted earlier this morning. CNN was talking about it. Ukraine fires U.S.-made longer-range missiles into Russia. Again, I told you with the longer-range missiles, the problem that you run into, again, is that it is not as easy to see the target. This is a big escalation. Let's get into this.
I think we are now going to have to see whether Ukraine steps forward and officially acknowledges that this indeed was an ATACMS missile launching this particular strike. Just in the last 48 hours, President Volodymyr Zelensky has sort of hedged that, generally saying, look, we're not going to necessarily announce this. Missiles will speak for themselves. Well, certainly that news has indeed emerged. What could Russia's response be? They have been unclear at this particular point, previously warning that if these missiles were fired by Ukraine, supplied as they are by the United States, that would essentially be NATO, the US and Europe joining the war, becoming a party to the conflict. Putin has not reiterated that himself since this, but indeed his foreign ministry made similar noises. So it's a key moment here, certainly, and it's one important to phrase it here, Amara. We're seeing the Trump presidency loom, the likelihood of negotiations there, European allies maneuvering, showing the fact they're not on the same page, frankly, as Olaf Scholz, the lame duck chancellor of Germany, made a call to the Kremlin head on Friday. That notion of diplomacy is clear and coming down the track. And so I think we're seeing the Biden administration giving this permission to use the ATACMS to potentially complicate the war that President-elect Trump inherits. And I think
yes, to complicate the war. This is all intentional. Now, this war has been going on for a couple of years now, so this could have happened at any time. Biden is doing it at this time because they did not win, because Kamala Harris did not win. So there has to be something seriously wrong with you that you would try to get back at the opponent by escalating a war. There has to be something seriously wrong with you. And the military industrial complex is a big part of this. This is all about money. Remember what I told you? Peace doesn't make money. Wars make money for the weapon contractors. That's how they make money. You don't have any wars, they start laying people off. The fact that now Russia would see this as a war no longer just with Ukraine, but also with NATO and the US, the NATO West alike. What has Joe Biden just done? What have they done? Everyone's saying, well, Trump said he wants to end the war. Guys, it's November 19th. A lot can happen from now until January with this conflict. We don't know what else Joe Biden is going to do. Zelensky walks into the White House and he walks out with a blank check. When it's been very clear since day one that Ukraine cannot win this war again, the goal is not to win. The goal is to destabilize Russia and to try to bankrupt Russia. That is the goal. Julian Assange warned us about these wars quite a time ago. I think it was a couple years ago, where he made the statement where he said that, again, the goal is not about winning. The goal is about having these never ending wars. Thus, you create this type of money laundering system through the military industrial complex. That's all this is. And innocent people die as a result. They're not trying to win. They know Ukraine can't win. Joe Biden, that they know Ukraine can't win. Get out of here. This is all about money.
Also give Ukraine a chance on the battlefield to get the upper hand. Remember, they're very worried, the Americans, about North Korean troops and a Russian offensive into that Kursk area where Ukrainian troops are currently occupying part of it.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable series of events, starting with President Biden with this major change in policy, allowing Ukraine to use these longer range missiles inside Russia. And then what we saw was Putin signing this declaration, revising the nuclear doctrine that you mentioned, that would it basically declare that a conventional attack on Russia by any nation supported by a nuclear power would be considered a joint attack. And then we see Ukraine using these long-range missiles. It's yet to be seen what Russia's response will be, but this would obviously be seen as quite an escalation by Moscow.
This would be seen as World War III. And let's not forget, China, there's North Korea, and there's Iran. And they are definitely not on the side of NATO, and they're definitely not on the side of the United States. So who do you think they're going to back? Russia. This is Joe Biden trying to push us into World War III. Now, at this point, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or if you're independent, etc. At this point, if you had frustration and anger towards George W. Bush during the Iraq War, you should have that same feeling towards Joe Biden with the Ukraine war, towards Israel and Gaza right now, regardless of party affiliation. Regardless, because at this point, back then, it was easier to say the Republicans are warmongers. Look at what they're doing. It was easier to say that back then. But now, are you saying that about the Democratic Party? Are you saying that, oh my God, the Democratic Party are warmongers? Look at what they're doing. How in the world did we have two new conflicts under Joe Biden's presidency, under Biden-Harris administration? Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, and Lebanon. How does this happen? This is who Joe Biden always was. Never met a war that he did not like. See, now people are starting to see it wasn't just Republicans that were okay in those wars. Now people are starting to see that some of those Democrat politicians, some of those senators, some of those Democrat senators and congressmen also are pro-war because they take money from the military-industrial complex. This is a dangerous game that we do not want to play. I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to war with Russia. Something to think about, folks. It's crazy times out here. I just can't tell you. We've said this over and over again. And the number of times people are like, no, we don't want to hear about foreign policy. It doesn't really matter. Yes, it does matter. It does impact you. It does affect you. Crazy times. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Lawn Guy. I don't have Twitter. LOL. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you know what, Lawn Guy? You might be better off. Thank you, Baby Ethernet. Zelensky can't even win without troops reckless. And he ran out of people. Thanks, Royal. One more time for the selfish people in the back, not caring about foreign policy is ignorant. It affects U.S. domestically just as much. That's right. And thank you, Paulus. Trump's policies first term were anti-Russian. He is a good manipulator. He isn't pro-Russia as the mainstream media wants you to think. No, he's not pro-Russia. And I don't even know if he would stop this war. He says he wants to. Like I said, we will have to wait and see. But I know what we have right now is not working. I know that much. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. We are moving on to our next story. Again, the theme of tonight's show is Will Dems learn? Will Democrats learn? Will Democrats learn? Well, Marianne Williamson is asking that very same question. Now, you guys remember Marianne Williamson ran against Joe Biden in the primary, even though the DNC would not allow them to have actual debates. She ran anyway, and she was on the ballot, and she did receive a number of votes in certain states as a primary candidate. Well, now Marianne Williamson, after endorsing Kamala Harris, is speaking out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, she is speaking out against the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris's campaign. I want you to hear what Marianne has to say about what the Democratic Party is doing wrong and what should be done. Listen to this.
You know, you've had some strong words for your party, saying that some Democrats can't read the room and need to step down immediately. So I'm just curious, who are you referring to?
Well, first of all, when I said they should resign, that's out of context. They should resign their position of leadership. They should resign their paternalism. They should resign their condescending attitude. I actually think that they have an important role to play in demonstrating a change in attitude on the part of the Democratic Party leadership. So I was not saying that, you know, they should, many of them, there's no official position to resign. But this idea that there is an elite group politically, in terms of the media, in terms of the donor class and so forth. It's something that has to change in their heads that then is demonstrated to the American people.
Yeah, we're taking a look at this article. You know, the Democratic elite should resign is the headline. People are feeling hopeless out in America now. And you write, in my opinion, Donald Trump offers false hope. He'll name a pain, but he will not name a policy that's going to fix it. But people will take false hope over no hope. So a lot of people seizing on that today, Marianne, and taking a look at that. And that's some of the wording that we're referencing. You know, and even former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi spoke to the New York Times, suggesting that President Biden should have dropped out of the race sooner. Let's take a listen here, and I want to get your take.
Here we go.
But let me just say this. We're only a couple of days since the election. There'll be many reviews of timing and the who, what, when, and why, and where as we go forward. And books will be written about it. The fact is, she did a great job with the time constraint that she had. Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. Kamala, I think, still would have won, but she may have been stronger, having taken her case to the public sooner.
So, okay, many people are asking and wondering if she is missing the point of what critics within the Democratic Party are saying. What do you think?
She's taking the exact wrong tack. Justification and blame. Justification and blame is not what's needed here. It's a continuation of the mentality that got us into this mess. It is not the mentality that will get us out. But
Pause for a second. You know what, Pelosi, Nancy, you ain't got it no more. You're starting to lose your finesse, just like Barack Obama. Everybody's speaking out against you now, Nancy, even though you're Dem leadership. You got Bernie speaking out against you. You got Marianne speaking out against you. James Carville, everyone's speaking out against you now. You don't have it anymore, Nancy. You ain't got it like that.
The American people need to see is contrition. What the American people need to see is an acknowledgement that something deep went wrong, and they need to listen to the American people, and the American people need to hear some humility. If I was in charge, this is what I would do. There should be a speaking tour with some of the top Democrats, perhaps Pelosi herself. And the three words that should be core to this are honor, humility, and economics. The American people are so used to getting emails in our inbox from the Democratic Party saying what the party needs from the people. The party needs to say to these groups, what do you need from us? They also need to say in the speaking tour, we recognize we got it wrong. What did we not hear from you?
In other words, Marianne is calling for an intervention. Have you guys ever watched that show, Intervention? I used to love that show, you know, and I realized I can't watch too many of those episodes in a row because it gets kind of gloomy, you know. It's just like these are people that have serious substance abuse issues, and you just can't watch too many intervention episodes in a row because you're just kind of like, damn, you know. But that's what it kind of sounds like to me. Marianne's calling for all of the like people that are part of the Democratic Party that are not in Dem leadership, that are not politicians, to sit in front of these Democrat leaders and to just unload, like, you know, get everything off of their chest and to tell them how they feel. That's what it sounds like to me.
Please tell us what we're not hearing. And then the third thing needs to be economics. What are your economic needs that you feel we are not serving? That is what the Democratic leadership needs to do to regain the trust and the emotional and psychological connection with people that is core to the gaining of political power.
That's really interesting. Oh, and what about the Democrats that might be getting groomed at this point, or that are being eyed for moving forward? Because everybody's now taking a deep breath and taking it in of what just happened. But moving forward, who do you see on the table, so to speak, who might be getting groomed for the next round?
Well, the same olds are the people that we all know. I don't have anything new to add to that. My point is not about the who. My point is about the what. Because if the people who are thinking of running in 28 only continue this level of we know, you don't know, we need you to come be here for us, and an undertending to the traditional political base of the Democratic Party, then it doesn't even matter who. The Democratic Party needs to reclaim the traditional values of the Democratic Party, starting with taking corporate cash back in the 70s, corporate consulting groups who are themselves conflicted, I think, operatives who don't really care. There are so many ways in which the corporatization of the party has peripheralized that which used to be the power of the party, and that is that the working people of the United States knew that the Democratic Party is there for me. You know, when Franklin Roosevelt died, there was a famous picture of a man who was standing watching the train, his funeral train, go by. And the man was crying. And a journalist said to the man, "But did you know the president?" And he said, "No, but the president knew me." The Democratic Party apparently doesn't know those people in East Palestine, Ohio, or the president would have shown up. They don't come across like they know. They come across like they're in an ivory tower, and they look to the people that they should be serving as ways that those people can serve them by showing up on election day. The days of that delusion need to be over, and a new chapter needs to begin, and it will come from the things I said.
So one of the things I want to add, again, Marianne Williamson, she wasn't my choice for candidate. She was not good on the Israel-Gaza issue. You guys know I care deeply about foreign policy. So she was not my candidate. And she was also running through the Democratic Party. But the other thing I will say, what she's pointing out here is that the party doesn't know the people. They don't know working class people, basically. They really don't know us. A lot of these politicians, the only time I even see them come around is when they're trying to get reelected. The congressmen, you know, the mayors, you don't see these people for years. And then when it's time for reelection, they're like, hey, remember me? It's like that one uncle that comes to the family reunion or comes around during Christmas. It's like you only hear from that uncle, like maybe during Christmas, and they're like, hey, remember me? That uncle. It's kind of like that. So I guess it's just that the Democratic Party made a big mistake by choosing to take corporate money. Now, they won't see it that way. Choosing to take corporate money, choosing to align themselves with elites, with the Ivy League crowd. Even a lot of the politicians nowadays went to Ivy League schools. The people that are being propped up or encouraged to run for 2028, like Cory Booker, come on. Get out of here, man. I saw Cory Booker speak when he ran in 2020. I saw him speak in New Hampshire, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in person. as fake as could be. I've never seen someone that fake. Like that was fake. And it was very obvious. There was an older dude in the crowd that pointed it out. And he said, you remind me a lot of Barack Obama. And he said some of the same things that you're saying now. And you guys had a similar background where you both went to these Ivy League, universities. And I'm just not buying it this time. I'll never forget it. Kudos to that older gentleman in the crowd that said that, but he was not convincing at all. So for somebody to push, like Cory Booker, I'm like, nah, bud, his eyes will get there before he does. Too soon. Bad. Let's go on a little bit more here.
Right. Well, is the new chapter, are you in there? Are you thinking about jumping back in?
I'm thinking of today. I'm thinking of the things that need to happen before any Democrat's going to have a chance of winning big. I'm thinking about 2026. I'm thinking about the needs of every American citizen who leans in the direction of the traditional Democratic Party and what it will take for us to reclaim the soul of the Democratic Party so that we can reclaim power in the United States.
So that was one of the appearances that she made. And there was another one that she made on Emily Jelinski's show. I guess Emily Jelinski from Breaking Points also has another show that she hosts. And I want you to hear what Marianne said on this show as well. DG Daniels said Cory Booker is the Temu Barack Obama. Stop, DG. Oh my God, that is so cold. Okay, here we go.
Was this point about theater? I think this is something you understand that other people in the party don't, that when Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016, he ushered in, as you said, a new era in American politics. And I thought Kamala Harris was at her best in this campaign when she was sitting down with someone who you know well, that would be Oprah. And then there was the Madison Square Garden rally, which the response to it was it reminded me kind of the Access Hollywood tape response. And as egregious as some of these things might be, voters see Donald Trump differently than a lot of people in the Democratic elite and the media. So looking back on how high-profile Democrats, powerful Democrats ran this campaign, what could they have done, if anything, with the candidates they were working with to match that level of theater that Donald Trump has now brought into American politics?
Resign the position that they have given themselves, by the way. These are self-appointed protectors of the Democratic project. Let in new people, because the process is as important as the goal. Ultimately, the end is inherent in the means. I believe, for instance, that the counterforce to the kind of strongman politics that Donald Trump represents is deep, authentic righteousness and virtue. And if you're going to have a politics based on righteousness and virtue, as Lincoln would say, the right as we see fit, none of us are perfect, but if we are making an honest effort at what would honestly, if we are to adhere to the principles of the Declaration of Independence, that God gave us inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what public policy decision would promote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to the widest array of people? You can either have that, or you can be thinking about what will make your donors happy. So the crowd that...
So that's a really good point that she brought up there about, are you going to make the people happy or make your donors happy? And in order for that to happen, like I said, you got to get corporate money out of electoral politics altogether. I think that's when you'll really see politicians be held accountable by their constituents, because again, it's like you're going to have to do something for the people if you think you're going to, get reelected. You're going to have to. There will be no APAC in electoral politics that's going to run all these ads for you to help you win. Like, you're going to have to hit the pavement like the old school days and knock on doors and tell people who you are and what you're going to do for them. And then you're going to actually have to do it. I said this before, and some people thought this was a little too far, but I said this before, that I actually wouldn't be opposed to politicians signing a contract with what they run on. Meaning that if you run on universal health care, and that bill is brought to the floor in Congress and you vote against it, you got to go. And some people said, Sabby, that's too cold. I'm like, no, why not? People sign contracts all the time. You sign a contract when you lease a car, right? You sign a contract, or we can say it's a contract, when you buy a house. You sign a contract when you take out student loans. So people sign types of contracts all the time. So my thing is, again, like if you're running on certain policies, and when those policy measures are brought to the floor for a vote and you vote against it, you're gone. That's it. You got to get out of Congress. You lose your seat and someone else gets to take it. No. I mean, it just makes perfect sense to me. That'll be a surefire way to hold people accountable.
Thinks that their job is to kind of broker doing the right thing with making sure that big insurance companies are happy, and big pharmaceutical companies are happy, and big food is happy, and big chemical companies are happy, and big agriculture is happy, and gun manufacturers. I can't pin the gun manufacturer thing on the Democrats, however, but everybody else I can, including big oil, God knows, and the military industrial complex. The corruption is so deep in both parties. So that crowd, what could they have done? They are so tied to believing that the money is everything. You know, sometimes I felt, Emily, during this campaign, over the last 3 months, there were moments when I felt, my God, he's running a presidential campaign. She's running a fundraising campaign. We raised this money. We raised that money. Hillary had more money than Trump. Money alone won't do it. An authentic emotional connection with the American people is what does it. And the American people didn't appreciate the paternalism of a system that seemed to be saying, we know what's best for you. You know, anybody with a modicum of historical understanding knows that when there is a large group of desperate people, people in fear, people in confusion, the emergence of a strong man is almost inevitable. And so the lack of psychological perspicacity, the lack of emotional astuteness that is involved in the pseudo-sophisticate crowd that currently runs the Democratic Party is very unfortunate. They got what they deserved. It's a crash and burn for the Democratic establishment. But we didn't get what we deserved. And the Democratic Party now needs to have the political equivalent of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where there's a deep and humble inquiry into what has happened, that the Democratic Party has lost its emotional and psychological connection to such a wide swath of the American electorate. Right now, it doesn't look like that's where they're going. Right now, it looks like the post-game analysis is being run by people who think just blame everybody else. Blame the Latinos, blame black men, blame white women, blame whomever. And for a system, for an organization, for a political party, just like for an individual, you're going to have to sit down and look in your own heart and your own conscience and into your own mirror and just say, what was my part in this? If the Democratic Party does that, there will be a regreening, there will be a rebirth, that's where the phoenix will rise from. And if it doesn't, anybody interested in a more left-wing populism will simply have to forge another path. But people have seen through it. The curtain has been pulled aside. All this codependent, whatever the DNC says, it was just a little man in there. It was never a Wizard of Oz. And we need to get back to our own critical thinking. And I think this is a wake-up call for the American people that I think ultimately will actually be good for this country.
So here's something I want to say. She mentioned Truth and Reconciliation. And again, like I call it a contract. Like, have them sign a contract. You know, I mean, like, how many times have you had to sit through HR meetings when you get a new job? Massachusetts is at will, employment at will state, where you have to read through all the stuff and you have to sign, and they tell you that this is an at will employer and you can be removed at any time with or without reason or just cause, etc. I mean, we sign things all the time, you know, so these are things to think about. So yeah, maybe they should have to sign a contract. Now, what's weird about this, and tell me how you think, what's weird about this statement from Marianne Williamson now is that she endorsed Kamala Harris. And Marianne was running as a primary candidate against Joe Biden, and they pretty much did everything they could to kind of shut her out, take her out of that conversation, obviously. And I feel like endorsing Kamala Harris basically just gave them the stamp of approval that what they did to you was okay. You can't sit up here and say that they're treating you wrong. The Democratic Party isn't treating you the right way. They won't even have a debate, and they're trying to ignore the primary, races. And then you turn around and endorse a candidate that was just selected, that was not a part of those primary races. Nobody voted for Kamala Harris in the 2024 Democrat primary. And I think I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. You guys know I have a merch store. I think I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Nobody voted for her in the primary. I don't have to put a name, but you guys will know what I'm talking about. So when Marianne endorsed Kamala Harris, to me, it's just like, again, why is everyone coming out and saying this now? Now, Marianne says the Democratic Party got what they deserved. But at one point, you thought what they deserved was for Kamala to win. That's why you endorsed her. And you said, you got to get out there and support and vote Kamala Harris. You knew she was running a bad campaign. I said the same thing about Bernie Sanders. You guys knew she was running a bad campaign, and you supported her and endorsed her anyway, because Donald Trump was so much worse. So I just, I don't get this. I don't get it. I don't know if maybe this is a push for Marianne to write another book. I don't know. But if you don't say it at that time when it really matters, it's too late. Too late, fam. Too late, baby. Yeah, it's too late. It's too late. Nobody wanted to say this stuff during the time when she was running and Marianne is not in Congress. Like, she's not in the Senate. She's not, Bernie's at least in the Senate. Like, you definitely could have said those things, right? Crazy. All right. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. There's just 55 miles separating Alaska and Russia. Yep, that's the closest state to Russia. Kel says, Sabby, Trump just appointed Oz to handle Medicare. Oh, Jesus Christ. Dr. Oz? Let me tell you something. Hold on. Okay. Let me tell you something about Dr. Oz, okay? I used to watch Dr. Oz's show back in the day until a friend of mine who's a nurse made it very clear to me and said, do not try any of those things that Dr. Oz is telling you to try, because he has a tendency to say you can do this stuff at home without telling people the side effects of the things that he's telling you to do. So Jesus Christ. Zainab says she was celebrating RFK Jr.'s appointment, which was weird. I know. Like, I'm so confused. I don't know what's happening here. It's like everybody want a part of something. I'm over here. I'm over there. Like, I don't know. Thank you, Peter. With U.S. policy making energy in Germany higher, illegal migrants ramping up wars, do you think soon our allies will shun us because we are nuts? I'm going to tell you a little secret. If you have been to some of those European countries, they already think that we're nuts. Maybe not so much the government, the government is still willing to work with the United States, but I mean like the people that are not a part of the government. You just talk to some of the Europeans, they're just like, America is crazy. But good question. Thank you, Justin. Marianne is just another grifter in the style of Bernie Sanders. If we want to have hope to move forward, we need to dump Bernie and Marianne. Yeah, like, I don't understand what's happening here. Thank you, Justin. Kenneth, they are signing contracts, Sabby, just not with us. Exactly. Thank you, Kevin. When I was in the 7th grade, I got called commie for my McGovern button. That's interesting. Today, it's Democrats who've mastered the art of McCarthyism and labeling your opponent to lower the discourse and sow confusion. I hear you there. That's interesting. For McGovern? Wow. Thank you, Peter. Make a new third party. No PAC money, no multi-issue bills, no more corruption. Candidate must fight like a honey badger, more rabid than cocaine bear. Thank you so much for that. And thanks, Fuzzy Balls. I love that name. Republicans never try to silence progressives. The only silencing of progressives comes from Democrats. You're right about that. You are right about that. Hey, hey, hey. Rose T said, Sabs, 2 things can be true. Kamala was a terrible candidate, but Trump would be disastrous for our country, especially for blacks, trans, women's, et cetera, et cetera. There were no good options. So I voted for what I thought it was the best option, and I still think it's the best option, and that was Jill Stein. Again, when you have these 2 options that are just ridiculous, vote outside of the party. We really do need to break this two-party system. Other countries have multiple parties that don't have to deal with these issues. And thank you, Zeneb. Brand New Congress had a platform, and we took signatures and a promise to challenge them if they break the contract. Yet the org later refused to hold them accountable for access. AOC. Yep, there you go. We will do call in tonight after the show, you guys. So should be fun times. Okay, so I told you we're doing the funny stories now, right? Okay, so let's get into this next one, which I also think is interesting. Morning Joe, right? They are really getting a lot of criticism this week because of their meeting with Donald Trump. And we'll get to that. Before we get to the meeting with Donald Trump, I do just want to remind you of just some of the things that, Morning Joe said about Trump voters and supporters and Donald Trump himself. And I want to go to this oldie but goodie. Not so oldie, but will Dems ever learn, ladies and gentlemen? I want to remind you of what Morning Joe said about Trump supporters right before the election.
I will ask the question that I think is a fair question to ask. Who raised these people?
Yeah.
Because they were not raised by anybody in my neighborhoods that I grew up, any middle-class neighborhoods that I grew up in.
Any middle class, first of all, is classist and it's degrading. Like, who raised these people? As if, I guess, everyone that supported Donald Trump doesn't know how to behave. They don't, they say you grew up in a barn or something like that. Is that how he's referring to them? Then he said, no one I knew who grew up in a middle class neighborhood behaved this way. So see, that's a class thing that he's doing there. He's basically looking down on them and saying, oh, they must be of lower class and they don't know any better. First of all, what's wrong being from lower class? And number two, how dare you assume that people don't know what they're doing when they go into a voting booth? So it's classist and it's degrading as hell. And people wonder why Donald Trump won. Who raised these people? Showing his whole class.
These people were not there. They were not raised. I mean, they weren't in the classes I went to growing up in elementary or middle or high school or college. They just weren't there. That wasn't the America I grew up in, where people would laugh at the idea of people of press getting shot. Like, everybody would like sit around and like, what's he talking about? Or again,
laughing at the Puerto Rican
other
joke.
things, laughing at the Puerto Rican joke.
My God,
that Puerto Ricans are a pile of trash. Are laughing at a 83-year-old man being bludgeoned nearly to death. That's an applause line. That's a laugh line.
There were Puerto Ricans that laughed at the joke too. And apparently the number of Puerto Ricans that you thought were going to come out and vote for Kamala because that joke happened didn't happen, which I told you guys. I was like, I think the white people on Morning Joe are more offended by this than most Latino voters. And you saw I was right.
Again, who are these people? Where are they coming from? And who raised them, and how did Donald Trump twist their point of view so much in 9 years that the brutalization of an 83-year-old man is something to laugh about, or the shooting of press members is an applause line?
Yeah, laughs and
Who raised these people? Where did these people come from?
Here's when Trump suggested the press should be shot. And my friend, the legendary photographer at the AP, Evan Vucci, who's traveling with the Trump campaign here, says that as each rally goes on, particularly last night in Georgia, the threats from the crowd to the press, they're there in the arena, only growing. They're really concerned there about the security situation. And that.
So he comes in to change the topic because he's even really starting to realize like what he's saying could be problematic. That's how they spoke about Trump voters. Here's how they spoke about Donald Trump. Just to remind you, because we are going to call names tonight.
As Trump's fascism is the lead story every day, his cozying up to
dictators, his obsession with Hitler that has now come out, what he has said about our veterans, and what he wants to do with the military against his political adversaries. It's all huge news.
There goes the Hitler comment. Everybody remember that? They were telling people that Donald Trump was obsessed with Hitler.
This is the future that we're looking at in the next Trump term, if there is one. But this is what voters know right now, that he is killing us. I'm talking about us women. He's killing us. He is putting us at risk. He is making us afraid to have babies. He is putting our reproductive health at risk. And some women have died already because of this.
So then what do you say to the women who don't agree with Roe v. Wade staying at the national level? What do you say to those women, Mika? You know, words have meaning when you say, and again, I don't agree with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I think it should have stayed the way that it was. But when you tell your audience that a political candidate is killing everyone, what do you think? Words have meaning. Words have meaning. And they said all these things about Donald Trump, and he still won anyway.
We can see right now what's coming. These headlines, and very good reporting, by the way, that shouldn't be questioned by idiots about what Trump has said about Hitler. That's incredibly important to know. But I do understand that people who are busy and that are people who are just tapping in may not be able to comprehend, because we've been free. We've been comfortable. We cannot comprehend that. And
no, Mika, you were comfortable. See, this is the other thing. We've been free. We've been comfortable. No, you were comfortable. You and Joe have been comfortable for a long time in your penthouse apartment. So a lot of us that are working class have not been comfortable. That was you. So now here comes an issue where I don't know, how old is Mika? But now here comes an issue where may not, depending on her age, impact her directly, but could impact people in her family, other women in her family directly, et cetera, or maybe has. You know, now it's, oh no, we've been free, we've been comfortable. No, that was you. The rest of us been trying to survive.
And I understand that. I validate that it is hard to go from here to there. It is where we're going. I hope we don't find out the hard way. But what's happening with women right now is real, and it is playing out across America.
So there was that. It went from these people and who raised them to he's killing us, telling people that Donald Trump was killing him. Well, after listening to that, and those are just a few clips, you may wonder why now, all of a sudden, they are changing their tune. I'm going to play this new clip from Mika and Joe, and I'm going to tell you what I think is really going on and why they are changing their tune about President, soon to be new President Donald Trump.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Pause. Now, you said you would speak to Donald Trump if given the opportunity. Let me ask you guys a question. You had to go all the way to Florida to do that? You couldn't just pick up the phone and talk to Donald Trump on the phone? What about a Zoom call? If you wanted to see him, wanted to see his face, you could do Zoom. I think Trump probably knows how to work Zoom, or somebody on his team probably knows how to do it, right? So think about those things. You hopped on a plane and went all the way to Mar-a-Lago. Now, that makes you wonder about the relationship that Mika and Joe have had with President Donald Trump in the past. You see, Mika and Joe weren't always mad at Trump. You know, back in the day, they used to be tight. They were like this. They love Donald Trump. That's what I was saying before. All these people who loved Donald Trump before he became president, like all of a sudden they try to distance themselves. No, you can look it up and see videos and pictures of Mika and Joe with Trump. They were part of the same team. They loved them some Trump until he became president. Because I don't know about you. Nobody else is getting able to just, oh, I want to talk to Donald Trump and we can just hop on a plane and go to Mar-a-Lago. No, he's doing that with people that he had a relationship with. So that tells you something about Mika and Joe.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues.
No, you didn't. I mean, you called the voters. You said the voters are who raised these people. You know, I mean, you guys were calling Donald Trump Hitler. So I guess the question that I have to ask is, you went and hung out with him in Mar-a-Lago. Who raised you? Are you guys Hitler too? What does that say about you? If you're having conversations with Donald Trump in person at Mar-a-Lago at his spot, it's not like you met on Zoom. So what does that say about you? No, you don't get no type of rebirth from me, because the reality is you guys have sat there for years. For years, you guys got so insane with your rhetoric. Then when someone tried to shoot at Trump, it was like, oh, we don't want anybody to go out and physically harm him. You guys have called him every single thing in the book. You have criticized and demeaned Trump supporters. And now we're just everybody's supposed to forget about everything that Joe and Mika said because they went and hung out with him in Mar-a-Lago. So people aren't Hitler no more. Corporate media.
And we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not.
So why weren't you doing that before? He told Lee, so they had tea with it. This tells you about the class that they're in, right?
Spoken to President Trump since March of 2020. Other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful. He was upbeat. He seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues.
Wait a minute. So he went from being Hitler to upbeat? I thought he was trying to kill you, Mika.
And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Because you told everybody he was Hitler and you said he was trying to kill you. I mean, guys, can I ask you, would you go see someone who's trying to kill you? I mean, what? Oh, God. People are handing it to Joe and Mika, by the way. They are handing them their ass. If you look on YouTube, everybody is criticizing them.
5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with them.
Duh, we've been telling you that. Independent media has been saying that. The average American is not thinking about January 6th. If you were to go to the hood today and you ask them, hey, man, what you think about January 6th? We're like, I don't know, shit. Have we made it to January 1st yet? They're not thinking about that. Most people don't think about that. You guys think about that because you have nothing else to worry about.
Their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
So, honey, as you guys can imagine, people are heavily going after Joe and Mika on social media and also on YouTube because them of all people, you guys have some nerve. So let me tell you why I think this is really happening. Joe and Mika
spoken to President.
I really think that this is a call for management. I think the producer of Morning Joe had a talk with Joe and Mika and said, hey, these MSNBC ratings are crashing post-election. Y'all need to make right with Trump. This is what I think is happening. Producer, management, the call came from inside the house, not from the viewers. And they said, listen, we cannot continue just to have an audience of people that are echo chamber. And some of the Kamala supporters pretty mad at you guys because of the information you gave them and you made them think that she really had a chance and it was a blowout. So we are losing viewers in mass. So management said, get this right. Stop talking about him in this light. It is killing our ratings. He's going to be president again. You better make it right. Oh, and by the way, I want to see you guys have interviews with him again as well. So also to maintain access, that means they went to Mar-a-Lago to kiss Trump's ass. They were like, they went down there to kiss Trump's ass so they can continue to have access. Now, here's part 2 of that discussion. Because it ain't over yet. Smooch.
As somebody close to Donald Trump told me this past weekend, this is a president who's not seeking re-election. So maybe, just maybe, now could be the time for both parties to get to work. And I know, given the jarring headlines that we read every day, that may seem like a stretch. But think about this. Of the 150 million votes cast, Donald Trump got 50%. Kamala Harris got about 49%. So I don't know. Seems to make sense for leaders of both parties to seek common ground if it's possible at all.
This is crazy, right? I know you guys listening to this, you're like, this is ridiculous coming from them.
I'll tell you, a lot of Democratic leaders we've talked to this past week since the election have told Mika and me it's time for a new approach. And when I say top Democrats, I mean top Democrats.
Top Democrats and the producer of the show. And, this is MSNBC News, not just top Democrats. So somebody pulled you aside and said, look, this ain't working. I mean, it's just, you guys have some nerve. First of all, you got Mika here, right? Who has done a very good job of making sure that she has absolutely no wrinkles on her face. I don't know how she did it, but Mika got that face together, girl. Okay, you got it together. Then you got Joe, who I've always said looks like a thumb. Joe always reminds me of a finger, like, nah. And they sat there for years pointing their finger at other people, shaming other people. So divisive. Here's the thing. People said Trump was divisive. People said the left was divisive. Nobody was more divisive than corporate media. Corporate media was the divider. You were the ones that were divisive. It was corporate media that was keeping people separated for so long. Corporate media is the reason why people aren't able to get together. It's you guys.
They said, we're open. And this was before we talked to Donald Trump. They said, listen, we're open to working with the incoming president if the incoming president is open to working with us.
Yeah, the question is, though, how do we get there? Hyperbole and personal attacks will not work. My hair on.
That's right. Don't call people. Well, you're not going to get there by calling people Hitler. You're not going to get there. They have some nerve to talk about divisive attacks will not work when they're the ones that have been divisive.
fire. Doesn't work. We've all seen that. What also does not work is threatening political opponents with arrest, harassment, and even jail. That is a failed path. Recent history has proven that impeachments and trials turn those on trial into political martyrs and only make them more popular with the.
You had to look that up to figure that out. Everybody hear this? Didn't we tell them this on independent media? Didn't we tell them you're making Donald Trump a martyr? You're making him more popular than he needs to be. They just figured this out.
American people. Just ask Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. We know this will be a consequential presidency. The question is whether it will be constructive. It will take a new approach from all sides, from both parties, and a leader who can bring them together. And only time will tell if Donald Trump is that leader. As for us, we also let him know that we will continue to speak truth to power and push back hard when called for, as we have with all presidents.
This feels like an after school special or something, or some type of infomercial. Like, we will also push back hard.
Don't be mistaken. We're not here to defend or normalize Donald Trump. We're here to report on him and to hopefully provide you insights that are going to better equip all of us in understanding these deeply unsettling times. And I am reminded of what Marty Baron, legendary editor, told his Washington Post reporters back in the first term. We're not going to war. We're going to work.
I'm sorry. It's hilarious. And them of all people, right? Them of all people. Well, there's more to this story. I talked about the ratings. I want to show you what Glenn Greenwald shared. Lots of articles on how MSNBC's audience has completely collapsed, disappeared once Kamala lost and the got delusioned. But the full extent is shocking. Their primetime shows can't even get 75,000 people watching in the key demo, 18 to 54. Weekend shows don't even get 30K. And we'll look at some of the ones that are more popular, like Melber, 66, Reed, 76, Hayes, 77, Wagner, 53, The Last Word, 53, Roulette, 62. And then when we go over to MSNBC Reports, 13, Al Sharpton, 33, K-Part, 27, Iman, 23. And then for whatever reason, the 8 o'clock one, they have no numbers for that. Melber, 26, Iman, 26, and Roulette, 23. So the ratings have hit them. And, they got to have those ratings. They got to make that money. But here's the funny part. So The View decided to discuss Mika and Joe's newfound appreciation and ability to want to work with Donald Trump. And they're not having it. They're not having it. Listen to this.
Look, there is a sobering reality, right? Which is that we have, in 2016, I think people voted for the unknown and voted thinking maybe the gravitas of the office was going to change him. It didn't. In 2024, people voted knowing who he was. And nothing that he is doing, as concerning as I find it and disturbing as I find it, should be shocking, because he told us he was going to do these things. Yeah. He was surrounded by the people he's appointing, and he is keeping to his word. And people voted for him knowing that. And so it's hard. It's a sobering truth. It's hard to reconcile that with what we have been doing for the last 8 years.
I just want to jump in here and just say the fact that people knew who he was and voted for him anyway in 2024, what does that tell you about the current administration, which Kamala Harris is a part of?
I will never sit with him. I don't think I'm going to have to. I don't think I'm going to have to make the decision, because I don't think I'm ever going to get invited. And listen, the truth of the matter is, as we know around this table, that it is hard to criticize and denounce the abuses of power by Donald Trump when he is president.
It's not hard for you guys to do that. You talk about that quite often on that show, actually. I would say that it's hard for the women of The View to criticize the Democratic Party. You guys sat up there and kissed Joe Biden's ass, regardless of what he did, right? You shamed anybody who was to the left of Joe Biden and said that we were ridiculous or too radical, et cetera. And Anna, let's be clear. You're not going to be sitting down having a conversation with Donald Trump because you're not even a regular cast member of that show, okay? You're a guest. You got a guest spot. She has a guest spot. She acting like she's a regular cast member. So no, you're not going to be sitting down anyway. So stop.
We have been there before. It means threats. It means death threats. It means retribution against your family. It means crazy things showing up at your house. It means lawsuits. It means all sorts of things. We've done it before, and if we have to do it again, we will do so again. I think there's a lot of people who are probably...
You said they made her permanent? I haven't seen her on here on every show. So if they made her permanent, holy smokes, yikes.
Looking at what Joe and Mika did and find it opportunistic. There are people who change their stripes, or maybe their spots, I should say today, depending on who is in power and what benefits them. I don't know that that's what they are doing. And to me, it's a to be determined situation because right now it's the transition. We don't know what he's going to do as president. We don't know what they're going to do if he commits abuses of power as president.
So if you don't know what he's going to do as president, why have you spent all this time telling people what he was going to do as president?
President. So, you know, everybody has to live with their decision. Everybody has to look at themselves in the mirror. I'm good.
I absolutely think it was the right decision. And I think it's good that they work on MSNBC. I don't want only Fox people going to see them. That was some of the problem here that I think everyone can agree, maybe even people that voted for Trump can agree, that the things they're watching on Fox are wrong. That's the only network that's had to pay billions of dollars because they got it wrong. So I don't want only Fox people sitting down with him. I want everyone. I don't need to know their motivation. I just know you get nowhere in silence. Conversations had to be had. I also don't believe in like, we don't platform or we don't do these things. I feel like those are very pie in the sky. If you're not having conversations and winning on ideas, you're not moving anywhere. So to me, this is what the country decided. He's not calling me, but if
he's not calling me either, to be clear.
He doesn't know who I am. But if he did, I would absolutely.
That's a good thing.
I would absolutely sit down and always have a conversation because I'm confident enough to sit at a table in contrast and disagree when I disagree. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid. You have the conversations or nothing happens.
So that was Sarah's way of telling, I guess, kind of saying to Anna, like, maybe you're not confident enough to sit down and have those conversations. I don't know. But the reality is, if you're media, you're supposed to be open to having conversations with any side of the political aisle. And what has happened is MSNBC and CNN have become the more liberal networks, and Fox News has become a conservative network, when in reality, they should be nonpartisan and they should talk to people of different political ideologies, but that's not the way it is. So this whole, we want to bring people together and we want everyone to come together. A lot of times to me, it seems like you just want people to come together that agree with your point of view. A number of people I hear say this, I want to bring people together. But then when I say, okay, well, let's get together with it. No, not those people, just people who agree with me. But media is supposed to, I mean, when I was growing up, the media was not supposed to be politically biased. The media, especially corporate media, it was supposed to be open to all different political ideologies, but it's not that way. So this is a big part of the problem. But like I said, this is really about the ratings. This is why Mika and Joe are taking that step. Now here comes Sonny.
Are you talking?
Well,
okay. Look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So
that's her throwing shade there at Mika and Joe. So this is Sonny saying that they are kissing the ring. And this is one part I do agree with Sonny on, is like, they didn't have to go to Mar-a-Lago to have that conversation. But again, what Sonny is leaving out of the conversation, what I told you, is that Mika and Joe, they were friends with Donald Trump. They were friends with him prior to his presidency. And then after that, they stopped speaking to him. So see, Sonny's not going to say that, but I can tell you that.
maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news. He is the guy who ushered in alternative facts. He is the guy who attacked 3 Black female journalists. He's the guy that revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials for asking him a question.
Pause. I'm just a little bit confused here because I think many of us knew that there was serious concerns with our corporate media in particular way before Donald Trump said fake news. And he wouldn't have been able to even say that if you guys were telling the damn truth. How many times do I have to come on this show and fill in the lines that they leave out? How many times do I come onto the show and debunk what they're telling you because they're not even showing you any information? A lot of times they just get up there and they read a teleprompter. They're not doing any research. What do you mean when you say these journalists? Are these people actually journalists? Anderson Cooper is not a journalist. He sits at a desk and he reads a teleprompter. A lot of these people are not. I've been into some of those studios because I majored in broadcast journalism and we had reports. We had field reports where we went out into newsrooms. So I know how they do it. So what do you mean? I don't even call myself a journalist. So what are you talking about? Yes, they do have propaganda in corporate media. Yes, they do manufacture consent. I remember Noam Chomsky wrote a book about that. So why are we pushing all that on Donald Trump? And again, I didn't support Donald Trump. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but some of this stuff is ridiculous. Some things you can put on Donald Trump, but you can't blame him for every damn thing. That's just how I see it. Jesus Christ.
And so I think that this president-elect, I hate to say it, would like nothing more than to have only Fox News cover him, would like nothing more than a state-sponsored media. And I don't think he can be trusted in the way that other presidents can be trusted. This is an aberration.
But the reality is...
Hold up. He can't be trusted the way other presidents were trusted. You trusted these presidents? Bill Clinton was having an affair with a White House intern under people's noses or, under their noses as they claim they didn't know anything about this. It just talk about abuse of power. You trusted Bill? Did you even JFK, if we want to talk about that, JFK had affairs, women coming in and out of the White House. JFK also, from what I understand, was also using a little, something. You trust these presidents? Barack Obama, who stood up there and pretended to drink dirty water in front of a room full of Black people in Flint, Michigan, you trusted him too? So why are we pretending like Donald Trump is the only president that people are like, oh, I can't trust him? I ain't trust none of these fools. I didn't trust George W. Bush. I didn't trust Bill Clinton. I didn't trust Obama. I didn't trust Trump. I didn't trust Biden. I didn't trust any of these fools. Seems like to me, Sonny, you have a little bit more grace than I do.
He doesn't just have Fox News. He didn't do a lot of mainstream media this election, but he went on Joe Rogan and reached 50 million people. Yeah. None of us could talk to Donald Trump again. No mainstream legacy media could, and he's still going to reach the vast majority of this country. So I actually think extremely highly of both Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. I don't think this is opportunistic. I don't think that this is a judgment on their character. I think they recognize 75 million people voted for this guy. He will be in power short of something, an impeachment for the next 4 years. So where can we make some changes on the margins? My first day, if I could say real quick, okay. My first day in the Trump White House working for Pence was the day of the Las Vegas shooting. Donald Trump worked with Congress to ban bump stocks. The Supreme Court later overturned it. One small thing like that could save lives. I'm not going to say I don't want to change anything if I have to acknowledge that this person exists and speak to him. I'd like to have marginal change.
I'm going to wait and see.
And Whoopi, we don't really care what you got to say. But what I wanted to say was this. It's like this show, as I said before, when this show was created, this was not a political show. The View was not. It was more about celebrity culture and about, like what's important to women, et cetera. And then over the years, it was, especially during the Trump part, like things really changed. And now it's more focused on politics. And I think it should just go back to the way that it was, where it wasn't heavily as focused on politics and it focused more on entertainment and, like home living and that type of stuff. But again, even with that, I mean, they didn't even want to admit that Morning Joe was doing this for the reason that I told you. They're doing it because the ratings are in the toilet. So again, you had to watch independent media to hear the full story of why this is happening, because the ratings are in the toilet and because DNC leadership, Dem leadership, a call went out and said, we're going to have to make some changes around here when it comes to Donald Trump in particular. So they didn't even want to mention that. This is what I was saying before. So Morning Joe did issue a response, by the way, because like I said, everybody was coming after them. Listen to this.
That's right now. We're trying to figure out exactly what hit last week. But one thing we know is there's a lot of work to be done.
And there's a lot of people that will be affected and impacted in the interim.
Exactly.
And I think that we can't miss the forest for the trees. When we have a new president, and that's who Donald Trump is, regardless of my views of him, we've got to figure out how we have people not suffer more than they can suffer if we're not dealing with that. That's why when there were those, and there were not as many as I thought, that said, why would you and Mika meet with Donald Trump? He's going to be the president. If you can meet with him, meet with him. That, to me, is no different than when people said to me, why would Kamala Harris go talk to Brett Baier? So on one side, she can talk to Brett Baier, but on the other side, he shouldn't come on Morning Joe. I don't think we've got an equal judgment here, because I think all sides need to be talking to all sides. Now, that's not my role. Donald Trump called me after he won the first time. I wouldn't meet with him because I felt that it would be a photo op and he promoted wrongly, right. Even though we should be discussing issues, and we have talked on the phone since then. But I know he's a promoter. If he had been born black, he'd have been Don King. That's what he does well. Right. But I think that what we need to do is deal with the issues that's going to impact people. I would say, I hope in your conversations, we should ask Donald Trump. You talked about black men would be with you. Where's a black man being nominated by you for your cabinet? Has anyone noticed there's no black that has been nominated on his cabinet? That needs to be raised. Right. Rather than who's talking, let's deal with what we're talking about. Well, yeah.
So I just want to say, Al Sharpton, you can just go back to being an informant and snitching on people, right? Because I know you're trying to keep your check at MSNBC too. But the reality is people aren't upset because Donald Trump may go on to Morning Joe. People are upset because the host of Morning Joe, Mika and Joe, have spent all these years calling him names and calling his voters names and saying he wants to kill peace, killing people and all that kind of stuff. And now they're hanging out with him at Mar-a-Lago. That's what people are upset about. In other words, people see Mika and Joe for what they are. Fake. Say he's just a friend. Say he's just a friend. Oh, baby, you.
And I will say also, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to everybody who was so kind last night, but also thank you. Willie, yesterday I saw for the first time what a massive disconnect there was between social media and the real world, because we were flooded with phone calls from people all day, literally around the world. Very positive, very supportive, going, I understand what you do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But once in a while, I would get a text or a call from someone and go, oh, man, I hope you're doing okay. And I call them back and I go, well, Eddie Glaude was one of them. I go, Eddie, are you on Twitter? And he goes, I am. I go, okay, well, I'm not. So we've had a good day. Mika just had a wonderful event, and it's fantastic. We're going to do all of us are going to do the best we can do, and we're all working towards a better America.
Take it day by day.
Day by day.
Is this Alcoholics Anonymous now? Are you taking it day by day? I don't know. Wow. Holy smokes. No, I mean, as media personalities, this is what you're supposed to do. Listen, I don't agree with everyone that comes on this show. Sometimes when I have guests on the show, people assume that I reached out. Sometimes they reach out to me. And I don't always agree with everything that they say when they come onto the show, but I feel like it would be wrong for me to only bring on people that I agree with everything. Also, that's an echo chamber, and who wants to live there? I don't even have a single friend that agrees with me on everything. I don't have a single relative that agrees with me on everything. Heck, my parents were just here the past weekend. I told you guys I took a couple of days off. They were just here the past weekend, and we had a debate about the dishwasher. So we don't agree on everything. And I just think people have to get outside of those bubbles. And that's how you grow and you move forward, as a community and as a people. And if you only attach yourself to the people who do agree with you on everything, how are we growing and how are we learning? And I think we need to start asking those questions. Danny, honey, let me tell you, my dad and I had a big debate about whether or not the dishwasher uses more water. And this went on for quite a while. And I won the debate because my dad, he had to Google it because he didn't believe me. He had to Google it. And he said, oh, wait a minute, my bad. You're right. The newer dishwashers are more energy efficient and it's using less water. I said, I told you. Debate about the dishwasher. I tell you, my parents, they're boomers, so they're old school. They grew up without dishwasher. And so my dad's like, there's nothing wrong with getting into the kitchen and washing those dishes and putting them in the dish rack. And I was like, ain't nobody got time for all that, And I was also like, look at how much water you're using when you fill up the sink with the water and then you got to rinse each dish or whatever. And I was trying to convince him that the dishwasher he's like, well, you run the dishwasher every day. And I was like, no, I don't. He's like, well, then how many times a week? I was like, I think we run it about twice a week. I mean, I don't, I'm not I'm not like filling up dishes every day, like, that kind of. Anyway, I don't want to get into that conversation. We can talk about that on Call-In if you guys want to, but it was a big debate. Let's go to the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Bust those suds. Yeah, he was like, you can bust those suds. Thank you for the tip, Roger. I never understood the mentality of those who get paid millions annually on these shows, who are forced by their boss to do things they don't want to do or else get fired. Like, that makes sense for us because our paychecks cause us to live by the seat of our own pants, paycheck to paycheck. We can't afford to miss a check or our whole world falls apart. But these people, you'd think they would have saved for a rainy day. And I'm pretty sure they have plenty of savings, but I think they like being on TV. I think they like their job and they like the perks that come with it too. So there's that. Yeah. Oh, Thomas, we choose the dishwasher over Kamala. There it is. The dishwasher. We can talk about it later. I see some people in the chat saying my dad was right. We can talk about it on Call-In. I don't know. I'm convinced that our dishwasher is not using as much water as he thinks it is, but it is what it is. Okay. We're now getting to the bonus story, which is also a fun one. Hit that like, fam, if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And this one is a doozy. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you that Roland Martin was heavily attacking those of us that would not support Kamala Harris. Those of us that were supporting Jill Stein, not even really going after the Trumpers, but going after those of us that wanted to support Jill Stein. Just out of nowhere, I would make a tweet about something Jill Stein did that was good, and here come Roland like, you know what I mean? Just out of nowhere, man. And so now it is being revealed that apparently I told you that Al Sharpton got paid from Kamala Harris. I told you that Oprah Winfrey's company, Harpo Productions, received $1 million from Kamala Harris's campaign. And now it appears that Roland Martin also got paid from Kamala Harris's campaign. Let's get in it. Shout out for Jamal Green, who brought this to my attention right before I went live. That's why I said we got a bonus story, ladies and gentlemen. It all makes sense when you see that they're being paid.
Now, didn't I tell y'all that Roland Martin was coming after us because he was paid to do it? A lot of y'all was out there saying I was trying to be aggressive with the man, and I was just trying to have a conversation about why he was on TV, national TV, calling me dumb and stupid and a fool just because I criticized Kamala's plans. And I told y'all the reason why he was doing this was because he was buck dancing for biscuits. Roly Poly was paid $350,000 from Kamala Harris. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Roland Martin was only going after people because he was paid to do so. Point has been proven. Enjoy them biscuits, Roly.
So, $350,000. Let's get to the receipts. We have receipts, not just that video, obviously. We go a little bit deeper on the show. Check this out. Now, it's Fox News. So when I first saw this, I said, I got to take it with a grain of salt because, that just could be a right-wing attack or whatever. But we have the actual receipt. So Kamala Harris interviewers receive large campaign donations to their groups ahead of sit-downs. Let's dive in here. And I told you again, of course, I told you about Al Sharpton. So we already covered that story. But now they're saying the campaign also gave $350,000 payment to New Vision Media on September 9th, according to the FEC filings first reported by The Times. New Vision Media is a media company ran by journalist Roland Martin. Martin spent roughly 30 minutes interviewing Harris on his streaming program in October. Listen to this. The former CNN contributor told The Times the payment was for advertising, then goes on to say it should have been a hell of a lot more, he said. More should have been spent on Black-owned media. So hold up, fam. I don't charge any guests on the show. Nobody who comes onto the show is paying me to come onto this show. And that's the case for most of us in independent media. We're not like, yeah, I'll interview you, pay me some money. No, someone's taking time out of their day to come onto the show. I also don't pay people to come onto this show. But here is, now you see the game. What did I tell you? Always follow the money, and then you'll see why people are saying the things that they're saying. You'll see why Roland Martin was heavily attacking those of us supporting Jill Stein. I told you he was an op. I told you he was a Democrat operative. Now, people can say, well, Sabby, you interviewed Jill Stein. Yeah, and she didn't pay me anything either. I don't ask guests for payment. That's the difference, fam. It's one thing if they're paying you $350,000 and you're out there busting your ass telling people to go and support the campaign versus you're interviewing this person and they're not paying you. That's how you know whether or not people are genuine or not. He's not being genuine. He got paid. Now, if you don't believe me, here's the FEC filing. Again, I told you these things always come up in the FEC filing. Harris for president. New Vision Media. Here's the date, September 9th, 2024, $350,000. So Kamala Harris's campaign was just spending money left and right. They blew through $1 billion. They gave Roland Martin $350,000 for a 30-minute interview. And he said, oh, that's for advertising, da-da-da-da. Like, so? That's a fucking lot of money. That's ridiculous. For 30 minutes? And then she didn't even go on a Joe Rogan show where she would have gotten more attention? Tell me how this makes sense. Make it make sense to me. Roland Martin even goes on himself to comment about this. Apparently he's mad. He's mad, angry about this, ladies and gentlemen. I think I moved myself. Here we go. Roland Martin said, so let me get this straight. CNN, New York, Fox News, MSNBC, BET, Sinclair TV, Salem Radio, iHeart Radio, and others can get billions in campaign advertising, but not Black Star Network. Bullshit. I'll be addressing this at 6 p.m. ET tonight. Watch it here. So let's see if Roland said anything about it. Let's see, folks. I also don't think that this is a good idea, but I don't know. Like I don't know if was that the best idea for him to. Let's see if he said anything about it. Let's see.
Y'all at home understand 1 Samuel 8. 1 Samuel.
Why are we getting into? Let me go back a little bit here. Let's see if he said anything about it. We're going into. Now, he said he would do it at 6 o'clock. He may not have. That's a federal worker story. And this is the, okay, that's a role of electing Trump. He was live for this long. Student achievement. Let's see what else. He said he was going to discuss it. Maybe he, okay, I know that's the White Fear book. And then it looks like this is a speech here. Maybe he didn't. Hold on. What's happening here? That's not a good place to pause it. I'm sorry, guys.
Saying that, oh, that's what I wanted. The Bible tells us when you want a king, understand, God will give you the desires of your heart, but that does not mean that that's operating within his will.
Oh boy, maybe he didn't do it. I know he posted that, but maybe he decided not to discuss it. Yeah, because now it's like some other stuff. Okay. Okay, so maybe he didn't.
You run 2 or 3.
Maybe he didn't discuss it. So, Eric, when we do the clip, we can take that part out. But never forget this. Never forget this is what Roland Martin does. So, did Hillary Clinton pay him too? Did Hillary pay him to do this?
That's how I told y'all need the music. Don't let the ass out. That's how I told y'all need the music. Don't let the ass out.
So I don't know. Did Hillary pay him to do that too? Did they pay? So what does this show you, ladies and gentlemen? If people have to pay you, right? It makes people question, was your support for them actually genuine, or was it because you got paid? And then the constant attacks where you're attacking people on Twitter who are not supporting Kamala Harris. Again, I got to remember, you got paid. You know, you telling people that Bernie would have never won. Again, you got paid. You telling people that voting for Jill Stein is a waste of time. Again, you got paid. You shaming Palestinians on Twitter right now and telling them, oh, well, you're going to wish you voted for Kamala. Shaming the Palestinian people right now. Again, you got paid. You pretending that there was no genocide happening and pretending that the voters are to blame. Again, he got paid. And that's what you always have to remember. These people have no morals. No morals. Because I got to tell you, you ain't got to tell me twice. You don't have to tell me twice what's moral and what I know is right versus let me just take this money. And Roland Martin wanted to take the money. Roland Martin, Al Sharpton, Oprah Winfrey, all these people. So again, if they weren't paid, is the support genuine? These are questions that we need to ask. We are going to do call in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take a quick break. Eric's going to come on. Eric, I think we have super chats to go through. And then I will be right back and we'll do call in. Yeah.
All right. So this is the part of the show where I come from the background to the foreground to give Sabrina a little break. Let me change some sizing, and then we'll be transitioning to the Zoom Hangout, formerly known as Call-In. Sabrina's actually setting up the room now, and then we'll be giving you the link to that. And I encourage everyone to come on in, come by. Participation is optional, but we'd love to hear from everybody who has something to say. You can talk about the stories we covered tonight. You can talk about other things, and it's always an interesting conversation over there at the Call-In Zoom Hangout. And you can put your camera on or off. Cameras being on is optional. We'll hear what you got to say. In the meantime, this Roland Martin thing. One thing he was saying was that the big networks get lots of money, and way more money than he gets. And, that's true, but that's really then just pointing out that we have a real money problem, in the system. And, thank you, Roland, for pointing that out, that he didn't mean to, but the real problem is this big money. And when you have the billionaires and their playthings, the mega corporations funneling these billions of dollars into campaigns, then you got issues like this. And his looks a little more obvious because he got paid on the relative cheap and did a softball interview and so forth. But that's really what I think we always need to land back on is, right, focus on the money, and it all makes sense. And he just made clear how the money's working. All right, let's see about some super chats. Thanks. Thanks, Roger, for this one. He says, no more advice to how Dems can improve them. Let them delete. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another thing in all this is that this whole idea of having better Democrats, I think is just a false path. We need, something completely new. I think anytime we talk about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as if they are separate entities and with separate interests, I think we go astray. I think it's very fair and accurate to call them the uniparty. They represent that top 0.1%. They don't represent our interests, and we need something new. In my opinion, we need a mass movement based on clear demands is the way we can get somewhere. But we're not going to get anywhere trying to do the Marianne idea of just getting better Democrats. Good luck with that. Thanks, Jasmine, for the super chat. She says, funny thing about the middle class remark, people raised in this neighborhood happily voted for Trump. They are the petty bourgeoisie, small business owners, wine moms, etc. They always vote right. And thanks for the super chat, NY Varsity Sports, who we usually see in the Zoom Hangouts, who says, what made my blood boil is at the same MSG rally, Giuliani said that Palestinians are terrorists at age 2. Not a peep from anyone. I just can't. I hear you. And let's see. Thanks for this one. Also, Jasmine says, Joe and Mika get what they deserve. You don't indoctrinate your viewers into believing Trump is Hitler, then cozy up to him and expect no blowback. And, the other thing I thought of, during that whole thing is that it's just theater, but what they're doing and everything when it comes to Democrats versus Republican and all this thing, it's theater to distract the peasants, which is how they see us, while their bosses run out the back door with all the money. And thank you for this one, Mr. Fuzzy Balls, who says, Puerto Rico's a 110 mile by 40 mile island that has 29 garbage dumps. Many have leaked into the water around the island, very polluted, all DC's fault. I hear you. And thanks, Helpful Harm. The media is shifting propaganda pipelines. CNN is joining Fox while TYT and Roland YouTube channels become the blue tube. Yeah, I mean, narrative management is very important in the corporate oligarchic system. They have to have a story for us. Thanks, Emily70, who says, thank you, Sab. You cracked me up. Just love how you backtracked on their hypocrisy. Thanks for that. And thanks, Courtney. Joe and Mika gone from never Trumpers to Trump salad tossers within a month. Yeah, funny how that works. It's almost like they have no principles at all. And thanks, 118 Debbie. Trump should never have let Joe and Mika in the door after their astounding display of disloyalty. Media is making their viewers insane. Yeah, and it's the whole big club thing, and Trump and Joe and Mika are all in that same club that we ain't in. So, they're actually always going to open the doors for each other. They just need to make sure that they keep us out. And thanks, Roger, who says, so if you ladies would have quit, he's saying that if they were instructed to interview Trump, like they would quit instead of doing it. Yeah. And also, Roger says, like I asked on Rockfin, yeah, we'll be reading Roger's chat on Rockfin momentarily. And thanks for this one, Peter version 1. Sabby, you and others, RBN, HLM, Door, are not journalists. You are muckrakers. What journalists used to be. Never compare yourself to the stenographers. And thanks, Dre Harden says, Sabby for president, cut the crap. And thanks for the super chat. Where's the love? Who says, Joe and Mika kissing Trump's ring, feet, and butts. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is they'll do any they'll do anything for money, and also like there was a talk of like, don't they have enough money? Well, firstly, they never feel like they have enough. That's their personalities, but also being on television is like super important to to them, and so that's also a thing. Like they don't want to get pulled off. Like that would like wreck their whole world. Thanks, Courtney, with the super chat. He says, by the looks of how Roland has been looking lately, he doesn't need another biscuit. Yeah. And thanks, Courtney, who says, just wait until the black preachers that got paid get exposed. Boy, oh boy. And let's see. We had Roger from the Rockfins. All right, who says, thanks for the tip comment on Rockfin, Roger. Who says, Trump insulted your wife, Joe. He said she had a bad facelift procedure, yet you chose your job over your wife. Getting $8 million a year and a net worth of $25 million. Joe, you mean to tell me you ain't have no money saved, put aside for a rainy day? Really? You live in check to check like the rest of us? Yo, I'm bouncing if it were me. All right. Even these up. Yeah, and then all right, so we're gonna talk about the dishwasher incident.
We can talk about that as well.
I liked Anthony's comment playing off of that one. He says, "I wash my dishes in the bathtub." Well, that's like the comment of the night.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the link is pinned to the top of the chat, guys. So if you look at the live chat, you'll see there's a comment pinned there with the link for the Zoom room. I'm going to go ahead and open the room while we're live just to make sure people get in and have no problem getting in. And the passcode is right here. Just in case you need that to get in. Sometimes they require it and sometimes they don't. So we'll let everybody go ahead and get in there. And then you can also,
Corey has set it up at Sabby Sabs 2. As we were speaking, Corey has set it up at SabbySabs2.com.
That's right. And if you want to speak, what you do is when you get into the Zoom room at the bottom where it says raise hand, that's what it says on my phone. On yours, you might have to click reactions and then raise hand, but just raise your hand. And that's how I know if you want to speak. And that's how we handle that. If you're new, everybody else does this with me, they already know what to do. But for the newbies, that's how you raise your hand, and I'll call on people and let you speak as well.
You can set me up as co-host.
Yep, I'll go ahead and set Eric as the co-host, and we just ask everyone to mute their mic. Everyone, please mute your mic. Thank you. Great. So just mute your mic when you come in. That makes it a lot easier. And yeah, we know how to do the damn thing. Okay.
All
and
right,
Eric,
see
you
you
can
then.
go ahead and just, mute people that are still talking. Other than that, guys, see you over there in the Zoom room and call in again. If you catch this later on the live, it's sabbysabs2.com. Go to that site there and you'll be able to get the Zoom link and the passcode as well. Other than that, have a good night. Keep up the fight.